The main character looked ahead with incomprehension. He didn't understand at all whether it was a hallucination or whether everything was happening in reality. It turned out that in front of the guy who was lying in his hospital room, a mysterious door appeared out of nowhere and simply hovered in the air. He immediately began to examine this door from all sides, assuming that it was some kind of magic. At that moment, the guy accidentally turned the door handle, causing a loud click to be heard. After this, the door opened and the frightened protagonist fell through it, not expecting anything like that at all. His fear quickly changed to surprise, because it turned out that behind this door, which was hanging in the air, there was a floor. The guy continued to be surprised when he looked ahead and saw a long, dark corridor that seemed to have no end. The main character immediately began to look around and loudly ask if there was anyone else there besides him. Suddenly, from the depths of the darkness, a strange sound was heard, which attracted the guy's attention and caused him anxiety. Gradually, the sounds became louder and louder until the main character saw in front of him a huge, scary monster whose eyes glowed in the darkness with a bright green color. The appearance of this mysterious monster and its unexpected appearance scared the guy very much, which is why he could not hold back his scream. In response, the creature also began to make loud noises and try to grab the man, so the guy had no choice but to run without looking back. Fortunately, the main character managed to quickly return to his room and closed the mysterious door behind him, while asking the monster for forgiveness for disturbing him and wishing him a good life. Then the still frightened guy began to worry about whether the creature would break out, but suddenly the door disappeared, as if it had never been there. Immediately after this, the main character heard an unfamiliar voice that congratulated him because the ability to tie the world together had awakened in him. The voice was happy that he had finally found the guy. Hearing this, the main character became very scared again and began to frantically look around, trying to understand who was talking to him now. The voice said that he was trapped in another world, so he could only communicate in this way. Then he warned that their time for communication was limited, so they had to act faster. First, he asked the main character to open his backpack and take out the relic from there. The guy did not understand what was being discussed, but he obeyed the voice. Soon he discovered a strange statue that clearly did not belong to him. The voice said that it was a cursed statue of the king of fallen spirits. It turned out that someone deliberately placed it next to the main character and used it to cast a family curse, killing and taking his soul, but the guy managed to survive. At this very moment, the protagonist began to remember that he was not the owner of this body. In fact, it belonged to a middle school student named Shun Ye. Then the main character realized with regret that the soul of this schoolboy was burned by the statue. He also knew that in his past life he died from overwork, but his soul teleported to another dimension and took over this body. Then the mysterious voice said that since the family curse did not kill the main character, it would give him power that no one had before. This took the power that the soul had accumulated over millions of years. After this, the voice asked the protagonist to knock on the gate again. Shen Ye was very surprised by this, but it turned out that these gates belonged to him. Soon, the same mysterious door appeared in front of the guy again, and the voice added that the main character had the ability to connect worlds together. The voice also said that since the guy behaved very politely when he entered the gate last time, he was rated as a polite person, and therefore he would receive an advantage. Shen Ye was very surprised to hear about the evaluation and thought that it was like some kind of passive skill. An unexpected voice stated that his strength was already running out and therefore finally advised the guy not to use the statue of the ancestral curse. Shen Ye immediately asked who this voice was and why he told him all this. The voice explained that he needed the guy because the world he was in now, called the Nightmare World, had lured him into a trap and now he needed help. The voice gradually began to fade away, but you could still hear it asking the protagonist to become stronger and free him, for which he was promised a good reward. Soon everything became quiet. Then the guy analyzed everything he learned and realized that they would try to kill him the moment he crossed the gate, but he did not understand the reason for this, because after rummaging through Shun Ye's memory, he did not find any enemies. After that, he decided that since he had no means of self-defense, he needed to enter the gate to see for himself, despite the fact that there was something terrible inside. Opening the mysterious door, Shun Ye continued to think that the skeleton looked very scary, so he should just try to communicate with it, because the guy clearly wouldn't be able to kill it on his own. The main character thought that communication was the best option and assumed that perhaps he would even be able to conclude a contract with the monster and confront the enemies together. Entering the dark corridor, Shun Ye immediately saw in front of him that same huge skeleton with glowing eyes. Despite this, the guy was not afraid, because he believed that with the title of polite, he would succeed. The first thing the main character did was greet the monitor that lived behind the mysterious door and tell it his name. The skeleton, although he looked very dangerous, still kept his words calm but intended to listen to the guy to the end. Shenya felt that his status as a polite person was working, so he continued to speak and apologized for disturbing the monster and offered to be friends. Suddenly, the main character saw how a dangerous creature began to swing its hand in order to attack him. Luckily, the guy managed to jump back in time because the skeleton's blow was so strong that it easily crushed the concrete floor. Shenya was shocked by what happened, but still tried to explain to the monster that he just wanted to talk to him. Instead of any understanding, the skeleton attacked the main character again, thereby showing that no dialogue would take place between them. In order to save himself, Shenya had to close the mysterious door and return to his hospital room. After that, the guy was glad that, thanks to the closing of the gate, the monster also disappeared, but he did not like his current title of a polite person, which he considered useless. As soon as the guy suggested that there might be other titles, the system notified that it could only be obtained once a day. Shen Ye was, of course, unhappy with this. Then the guy called the gate again, because despite the danger that lurked behind them, the killer could come to the hospital room at any time, so it was necessary to hide as quickly as possible. The main character, who in his past life was a top salesman, decided to remember his skills and be more persistent, so he opened the door again, changing for worrying along the way. At that moment, the bloodthirsty skeleton rushed towards Shenya in order to finally catch him and kill him mercilessly. Unfortunately for the monster, he failed to accomplish what he had planned, so he began to take out his anger on the iron door, which he literally tore to shreds. Despite this, very soon, exactly the same door from which Shenya came out appeared next to the skeleton. He claimed that everything the monster did was useless. The guy also said without fear that the skeleton could not eat him because he was traveling in two worlds at once, so it was better to finally just talk. The monster was very angry, so he attacked the iron door again, not believing what the main character was telling him. Despite this, the gate soon reappeared, and Shenya offered the monster to simply listen to what he had to say. Surprisingly, the skeleton, who seemed to finally understand that his aggressive actions were useless, suddenly turned around and began to walk into the depths of the dark corridor, despite the fact that the guy asked him to stay. Then the main character noticed that the monster was wounded and suggested that when it ate people, new bones grew at the site of the fracture of the left arm. In addition, the skeleton had many other injuries. Hearing this, the monster suddenly stopped and, turning slightly towards the guy, confirmed his guess. It turned out that he could speak. Hearing this, Shen Ye said that in his world there were many beneficial substances for bones that the monster could eat, such as a calcium tablet that specialized in treating bones. The guy continued to say that besides this, there were many other supplements that were much more nutritious than a living person. So if they became friends, he could buy the skeleton all this. The main character believed that this friendship would be useful for both of them, so all he could do was wait for an answer from the monster. Suddenly, the guy saw how the dark corridor was filled with streams of mysterious aura which looked completely unfriendly. It turned out that the reason for this was a skeleton, which seemed to be about to attack the main character with the help of its magical abilities. Shenya was no longer surprised that his life had been in danger recently, so he prepared to return to his world, thinking that he needed to think of something else. At that very moment, some document appeared out of nowhere, and a system notification informed the guy that he had signed a contract. Shenya was very surprised by this and could not contain his joy at the fact that he had managed to do what he had planned. He then learned that the person who signed the contract was the mother of Dark Bones, the king of ghouls, and the defeated lord of the underworld, Mikteti Kahiva. The guy was amazed by all of this. The system also said that the defeated Mr. Mikteti Kahiva was an officer of the combat depot of the 5th Team of the Army of Darkness. The content of the concluded contract was an equivalent exchange. The postscript stated that the skeleton hoped that the protagonist would help him restore his strength. It was also stated that Mikteti Kahiva never signed a contract with anyone except the gods, so the guy should appreciate it and sign the document faster. As soon as the guy put his signature, the system reported that he was the one who defeated the curse of the fallen evil spirits, was the guardian of the kingdom of dreams and reality, and was the only spatial gatekeeper of the two worlds. After the parties to the agreement learned everything about each other and discussed the terms of cooperation, The contract was signed and entered into force. Some time passed. The main character was already in his house and was receiving care from his new relatives, who did not suspect anything and were very worried about him. The kind woman asked the guy to rest and handed him an excellent tonic, and the man in glasses said that he bought calcium tablets. Shenye was embarrassed and thanked his new mom and dad. In his previous life, he was an orphan, so now he was very pleased that someone took care of him. Unexpectedly, this conversation was interrupted by someone loudly knocking on the front door several times. Upon opening the door, it became clear that these sudden guests were officers from the Dongcheng County Police Station, and they were the ones in charge of the case that Shenye had gotten into. The policeman said that every year there were many similar incidents that could not be predicted, and the authorities had no solution, but fortunately Shenye managed to recover. The main character found all this very unpleasant to listen to, because he knew very well that the man was wrong in his judgments. In fact, the high school student Shenye was killed by a family curse, and his body was occupied by a completely alien soul. Then the guy asked regretfully if someone had encountered something similar, then nothing could be done and one should simply follow the lead of fate. For a while the police were simply silent because they had no answer to this question. Suddenly one of the men who had an unusual hand turned to Shenye and assured him that he understood his feelings, but he had to say something. The policeman said that the hospital would soon be closed and no one would even be allowed to enter it, so there was no need to worry about new victims appearing. Shenye noticed that the man had 3 stars on his uniform, which meant he was a captain. He then thanked the policeman for calming him down. After that, the captain thoughtfully said that the main character was just a schoolboy, so the likelihood that he had enemies was very small. Soon the police officers were about to leave since they had managed to talk to the victim and had nothing more to do there. Meanwhile, the guy was thinking that the king of the fallen spirits was really very dangerous, because not only the police, but also the government could not do anything about it. The main character was also troubled by thoughts about who even came up with the idea to send such a powerful curse on Shenye, who was an ordinary student. Unexpectedly, these thoughts were interrupted. The guy saw that the police captain had returned and was heading towards him. Then the man extended his metal hand to the main character and asked him to add. He took his business card. Shenye was very surprised by this. Finally, the captain asked the victim to call him if something went wrong. After examining the business card, Shenye learned that this captain's name was Luo Feichuan. He was glad that there were still good workers in the police, but he doubted whether he was worth trusting. Still, the guy thought that the man clearly did not follow the instructions when he gave him this business card, but it was unclear what the small captain could do in such matters. Shenye also couldn't help but think that now everyone knew that he was still alive, which meant that the killer would definitely not give up. The protagonist began to suspect that perhaps even Shenye's family was involved in this matter. That's why the guy suddenly jumped up with the thought that he needed to become stronger. After that, he summoned the gate to begin his preparation. At that very moment, that same mysterious iron door appeared in the middle of the room. The main character was well aware of his status as a polite person, so before entering the dark corridor, he put a smile on his face like a salesman. As usual, the world beyond the gate was in absolute darkness, so Shenye had to loudly call out to Mikteti Kahiva and ask where he was. At that very moment, the sounds of old bones rattling could be heard in the darkness, echoing throughout the room. Soon a huge skeleton approached the main character, descending to him from the ceiling. Shenye calmly greeted the monster and told him that he had brought him the promised medicine. To Mikteti's surprise, instead of taking the pills as per the contract, Kahiva extended his finger to the guy. The main character took it as if his monster wanted to take all the medicine right now and was not at all against it. However, the guy was wrong. Suddenly, the dark room was illuminated by a mysterious aura, which began to concentrate in the hand of Mikteti Kakiva. The system informed Shenye that the other side was waiting for his gifts, and in exchange for this, the skeleton had a precious relic of an ancient warrior. It was the original dream crystal, which was created by the High Elves and could imbue the user with certain knowledge, skills, intelligence, and so on. Shenye was very surprised by this, but he happily accepted this precious relic because he really needed the knowledge and skills now. Without thinking twice, the main character destroyed this mysterious crystal in order to use it for its intended purpose. At that very moment, the system informed the guy that he had learned a skill called Deer Under the Moon. It was the main technique of the elves. The undead and elf clans fought all year round, and to fight the enemy, the elves created this technique that improved the body. The guy was simply amazed by this. Now the main character understood what a valuable reward Mikteti Kahiva had given him, and absorbing the mysterious aura, He already felt how he became stronger. Meanwhile, the medicines magically began to fly out of the package and go deeper into the dark corridor. This was the work of Mkteti Kahiwa, who wanted to receive the promised pills in exchange for his attitude in order to improve his condition. Soon, the medicine and the monster itself disappeared into the depths of the dark corridor. At this point, the communication between the monster and the main character was over for now. Shen Ye was not at all happy about this and did not understand why the monster did this, since a contract had already been signed between them. After this, the main character returned to his room and decided to first study the acquired equipment better. But suddenly he heard a strange knock. He immediately assumed that it was his parents returning. It then turned out that learning the deer under the moon technique required 3 points of agility, while the guy only had 2. Shen Ye didn't understand how he could raise his agility. At that moment, the main character suddenly heard a rough, unfamiliar voice behind him. Its owner was surprised that the guy was still alive. Turning back, Shen Ye saw a dark silhouette outside the window of his room looking straight at him. This couldn't help but cause concern. The man with a disfigured face and many scars wasted no time in threatening to kill the main character himself. Without wasting time, the armed villain, whose face was hidden under the mask, rushed at the main character. Fortunately, Shen Ye managed to jump back in time and avoid being hit by the dagger island. This surprised the man. He praised the protagonist for his dexterity, but had no intention of giving up his intentions because of this. Meanwhile, the guy immediately realized that it was a killer who wanted to finish what he started, but he did not expect that he would come to him so quickly. Nevertheless, the main character decided to activate his politeness, and having greeted the villain, asked why he had come to him. But this man only asked the guy not to chat, and let him kill him in peace. Shen Ye had to dodge the attack again, while thinking that establishing contact was useless. Meanwhile, the system reported that the crystal gave the guy knowledge that skills and equipment had their own levels. The polite person skill that the main character had was gray broken, that is low. The man soon realized that using a dagger to deal with Shen Ye was useless, so he pointed a gun at him, believing that he would not be able to dodge the bullet. The main character immediately realized that he was in a hopeless situation, but at that moment, the system reminded him that he could absorb skills and increase his level. Shen Ye was very surprised and became indignant that he was not informed about this earlier. Then, without wasting any time, he absorbed the skill of a polite person. Thanks to the successful absorption, the protagonist received 1 point of agility, and now he had enough points to learn a new skill, which Shen Ye immediately took advantage of. After that, the guy went on the offensive and slightly pushed the killer away from himself and called for the gate in order to find his salvation there. The man quickly came to his senses and saw his victim running behind a mysterious iron door that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Without wasting time, the villain ran after the main character, loudly declaring that he would not be able to escape from him. The man was instantly taken aback when he saw that he was in a huge dark room, which he assumed was a secret room. Suddenly, the killer heard behind him the contented voice of the main character, who was standing at the door saying goodbye to him. The man immediately rushed to his victim, but she had already managed to close the door. At that moment, several dim green lights appeared from the darkness. Very soon, the villain saw before him a huge skull with sharp teeth, which he intended to eat. Without any doubt, the monster began to mercilessly devour the uninvited guest, who became his first meal in many years. When it was all over, Mkteti Kahiva began to enjoy the mysterious aura that enveloped his injured left hand. A hearty lunch contributed well to the recovery. At this time, Shen Ye stood silently in his room, breathing heavily as he came to his senses after nearly losing his life at the hands of a mysterious assassin. The guy was very scared because he never expected that a killer would come to him, so he thought that he couldn't hesitate and needed to quickly find a person who could protect him. At this point, the system notified the protagonist that he had given great pleasure to Mkteti Kahiva, and, following the principle of equivalent exchange, the other party to the contract took the exchange item and recognized the guy. Shen Ye was very surprised when he saw that in return he received 2 items of very good green quality. These were the Crown of Pale Shadows and the Silver Military Badge. The Crown of Pale Shadows was of an excellent level and was made by the masters of the Spirit Tribe. It was armed with a high-level shadow technique, and as long as the protagonist wore it, he could pretend to be an elf. The Silver Military Medal was a symbol of honor for the military exploits of the elves in the world of nightmares, which was received only by soldiers who had achieved great success. Using it, the guy could move to the land of the elves. Shen Ye was very pleased, because he did not expect the deal to be so profitable. The first thing he decided to do was test the crown in action. At that very moment, the main character was transformed and began to look like a typical fantasy elf with characteristic ears and long blonde hair. Shenye was delighted and pleasantly shocked by this transformation and thought that he should definitely try out his new abilities tomorrow. Suddenly, the main character was interrupted by a knock on the door. Then, an unfamiliar voice was heard asking if Shenye was home. Because of this, the guy tensed up, thinking that the killer had come to him again. Having received no answer, the voice asked if Shenye was okay and added that it was Chen Haoyu who had come. The protagonist knew that it was Shenye's best friend. On that fateful day, he went to the hospital to visit him, so after returning to his previous form, he allowed the guest to enter. At that moment, Chen Haoyu entered the room and with tears in his eyes rushed at his friend, starting to say that he was very worried about him. The guy asked the main character for forgiveness and insisted that if it weren't for him, his friend wouldn't have been in such trouble. Shenye asked the guy not to blame himself. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, the main character's mother appeared, who was very surprised by Chen Haoyu's appearance and immediately assumed that he had come to visit her son. Shenye was glad that she had already returned and asked where Dad was. The woman replied that he had gone to his grandfather for medicine, after which she asked if the guy had eaten the restorative pills. Chen Haoyu was very surprised to hear this because the recovery pills were very rare and even the rich could not afford them. This made the main character's mother feel awkward. The guy then said that Shenye had very caring parents and asked him to get well soon and return to school because he had exams ahead. The protagonist immediately remembered that the previous owner of his body was still in school and had entrance exams waiting for him. Because of the family curse, Shenye had already missed the first exam. Chen Haoyu began to blame himself again. Then the woman said that her son had only missed the first test for strength, and if he passed the second test for dexterity, he would be able to enter a regular high school. From these words, Shenye understood that the entrance exams in this world were different from what he had experienced before, so the deer under the moon technique could still be useful to him. However, the main character did not forget that now a hunt had been declared for him, and danger could be waiting for him anywhere, which meant that going to school was very dangerous. From these thoughts, the guy began to involuntarily tremble with fear, which of course his mother noticed. Shenye was very worried about what would happen if he just gave up. The woman, seeing all this, simply remained silent, but she understood perfectly well that now the main character needed her support. That was why she suddenly hugged her son and held him close, which surprised Shenye greatly. The woman then insisted that if her son did not want to take the exams, then there was nothing wrong with that. She also said that she and her father only hoped that the boy would recover. These words of support impressed the main character so much that all his fear and worries immediately disappeared. Then he asked with great enthusiasm that his mother not worry, because he was not that weak. Shenye knew very well that if he decided to refuse to take the exams, his mother would not be against it, but he could not do so. Therefore, the main character insisted that tomorrow he would go to school and take part in the exam. Shenye's memories kept running through his head, which is why he knew that his grandfather and family were of noble origin and had a lot of opportunities. However, the relationship between relatives in the family was very bad. The parents had never asked their grandfather for help before and lived off their own labor, sometimes barely making ends meet. Therefore, the main character assumed that his new parents must have also had a very hard time getting the medicine. He believed that the parents had to turn to their grandfather to help them get the drugs, even without knowing that their son was already dead. That is why the main character could have let them down. Soon after, Shenye approached his mother and said that he was very hungry, which is why he was able to have dinner with his best friend. The next day came. The protagonist, as planned, went to his high school in order to achieve his goal. The guy was very surprised by the subjects they studied in this school, because they were very different from what he had before. For example, they studied spiritual enlightenment and strength exercises here. Shenye believed that the killer would not attack him if he was in a school where there were many people. He was also confident that if he could get into a good high school, the new teachers would be able to protect him. Suddenly, a classmate of the main character approached him and told him that Zhao Yibing was waiting for him in the corridor. The guy was very surprised by this. The guy knew that Zhao Yibing was Shenye's friend, so he went out into the corridor without a doubt to talk to her and find out why she was looking for him. The girl found out that her friend wanted to take exams, so he told her that she had already passed the first exam well and was confident in the rest, so she would definitely be able to enter the best school. Shenye, hearing this, was sincerely happy for his friend and congratulated her on her success, but the girl remained somehow cold and distant. Unexpectedly, Zhao Yibing quickly got to the point of this conversation and asked that the protagonist not come to her anymore. This caused confusion in the boy, and his classmates who witnessed this conversation began to make fun of him, saying that Shen Ye rejected the school flower. Zhao Yibing insisted that she and Shen Ye were at different levels, so it would be better if they each went their own way. This meant that their friendship was over. Then the girl deleted the guy's number from her contacts and was about to leave. The main character was very surprised and did not understand whether all this was just because he missed one exam. Then the guy replied that he had never taken the initiative to maintain this friendship, and therefore was now glad that the girl would no longer bother him while he was taking the exam. Classmates immediately began to remember that when Shen Ye was first, Zhao Yibing followed him closely, so it was surprising that she shamed the guy in front of the entire school just because she missed an exam. At this moment, Zhao Yibing's friend stood up for her, and with displeasure reminded the protagonist that the girl had given him many gifts, so he shouldn't have said that. Suddenly, Zhao Yibing couldn't contain her emotions and started crying while saying that she thought that she and Shen Ye were friends. To this, the guy calmly replied that he accepted the girl's gifts but not her herself. Everyone was delighted with this answer and believed that dark magic should be eradicated only with the same dark magic. Then the main character, leaving, said that Zhao Yibing should not have tried to tie him to himself with just gifts. Finally, Shen Ye categorically stated that he could return all the gifts to the girl if she wished, but he did not intend to be friends with her. Zhao Yibing's grumpy friend was very unhappy with what Shen Ye said, and so she loudly called him a scoundrel. The other school children who witnessed this conversation also did not support the main character because they thought that he was acting too low, but the guy did not pay attention to this. Surprisingly, Zhao Yibing wanted to talk to Shen Ye and explain everything, because she didn't want everything to turn out like this. Suddenly, a huge angry guy appeared in front of the main character and ordered him to stop. This student, through tightly clenched teeth and furrowed brows, insisted that Zhao Yibing had not finished speaking yet, so Shen Ye should not rush to leave. The main character recognized this schoolboy. It was Sun Ming, whom he asked to get out of the way because he was returning to class. The boy then said that his strength had increased significantly since Shen Ye had been absent from school for several days, so he should apologize to the girl if he didn't want to get hurt. Shen Ye sighed heavily and replied that Sun Ming was mistaken because the girl had come first to disgrace him. Soon the protagonist realized that any explanations were useless. That's why the protagonist turned to Zhao Yibing again with his head down and asked her for forgiveness, admitting that she had won. With cuts in his eyes, the guy continued to say that the girl could continue to bother him, and in general, everything would be as she wanted. After this, the main character began to quickly run away, pretending to be a very vulnerable and offended guy. Everyone was truly shocked to see this. The students couldn't believe that Shen Ye was crying and assumed that he was feeling very bad now. Zhao Yibing also felt bad about everything that was happening. The girl couldn't stand all this and loudly turned to her friend and asked him to add that he didn't run away because that's not what she meant at all, and she didn't want to upset him. Sun Ming, who came here to support Zhao Yibing, couldn't just let the protagonist go, so he chased after him to teach him a lesson. Unexpectedly, the guy allowed himself to swing his fist sharply and try to attack Shen Ye, which he, of course, noticed perfectly well. The next moment, in order to avoid being hit by a powerful blow, the main character jumped high up and did a somersault in the air, while his opponent had not yet had time to realize anything. Everyone who watched this from the side were shocked and could not take their eyes off Shen Ye. At the same time, Sun Ming, who did not expect anything like this, did not immediately understand what had happened and, moreover, received a weak blow to the head from his opponent. After all this, the protagonist calmly landed on the ground behind Sun Ming, simultaneously emitting a mysterious aura around himself, which meant that he had used his skill. The students immediately started talking among themselves, not believing what had just happened and not understanding where Shen Ye got such speed from. Meanwhile, the guy calmly asked what else people needed from him, since he had already asked Zhao Yibing for forgiveness. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, a teacher appeared, who began asking with displeasure what the children were doing here, and insisted that they all needed to run to the playground to take the exam. Everyone immediately began to run away, fearing punishment from the teacher, while expressing regret that they were not able to see how it all ended. Finally, Sun Ming turned to his opponent and frowned, threatening that they were not finished yet. Shen Ye did not take this seriously. Very soon, the main character, along with the rest of the school children, went out to the training ground where he had to take the exam. While the guy was passing him, Chen Haoyu suddenly ran up to him and said that the testing was going very slowly. That's why the guy thought that it would be a long time before their turn came and suggested that his friend go with him to the comic book store, which was located behind the school. At this moment, Shen Ye remembered that he had completely forgotten to take the note, so he refused his friend's offer and pretended that he had a severe stomachache and needed to go to the toilet. Soon after this, the main character was already walking along a dimly lit corridor in which there was no one except him. However, the guy was still on guard and looked around. You see that no one was following him. Shen Ye stopped pretending and quickly ran into the toilet. At that moment, a mysterious man appeared in that same corridor who was very happy about the appearance of the main character. Surely it was another killer who, in order to carry out his task, quickly headed after his victim. As a weapon, the villain intended to use a pen that was strengthened and reinforced with sinister energy. The man quietly entered the dark room, trying not to frighten his victim prematurely. Then the scoundrel began to examine the room in order to find the guy, but very soon he was dumbfounded on the spot. It turned out that the main character was nowhere to be found. The killer did not understand how this was possible, because he clearly saw Shen Ye enter this room. At this time, the protagonist used the crown of pale shadows and turned into a real elf. It turned out that the guy had already passed through the gate and found himself in another world. Walking along the corridor, he loudly called out to Mikteti Kakiva, but no one answered. Suddenly, Shen Ye, unable to see the road in the darkness, stepped on something. It was the gun of that very killer, which was also loaded. Shen Ye took it for himself, thinking that it was another good thing for self-defense, even though he had never touched a weapon before. Then the guy decided that he no longer had time to look for Mikteti Kakiva because he needed to deal with another matter, so he used the silver military medal. At that very moment, energy began to rage around the main character, preparing him to move into the world of elves. Suddenly, the protagonist heard an unfamiliar, ominous voice speaking to him. This surprised Shen Ye greatly, but he began to listen carefully. The voice claimed that it could no longer help the guy, so it asked him to take something. At the same time, some object was created from dark energy in Shen Ye's hand. While the bright light was absorbing the main character, a mysterious voice said that it was a keepsake, and then fell silent. After this, the main character disappeared, leaving no trace behind, as if he had never been there. A moment later, the main character found himself in a quiet green forest, which was very different from the dark corridor, so it surprised the guy. Shen Ye felt dizzy from the movement, but he still began to look around. It was hard for him to believe that he had actually ended up in the world of elves. Then the guy remembered the gift that the mysterious voice had given him. It turned out to be a sharp dagger, which it was still unclear how and why to use. Suddenly, the main character heard an unfamiliar voice behind him, asking who was there. Turning back, he saw 3 elves and was already preparing for battle, but one of them recognized the guy and called him Phelan. Hearing this name, Shen Ye immediately realized that in this world, he was called exactly that, and these elves were apparently his comrades. These elves were glad that Phelan was finally here, because if he hadn't come, they would have had to declare the mission a failure and tell everyone about it. The main character apologized while thinking that all 3 of these elves had crowns of pale shadows on their heads, which meant that they were not real. Then one of the impostors said that they had already won the trust of the elven tribe, which considered them heroic soldiers, so that evening they could kill the head of the tribe and take possession of his treasures. To this, Phelan, adjusting his crown of pale shadows, replied that he had already fully come to himself and was therefore ready for battle. Seeing this, the other impostors immediately began to get nervous and asked their comrade not to touch the crown. Shen Ye was very surprised by this. Then one of the elves insisted that if the main character revealed his identity, then they would all come to an end. The guy had to apologize for this. He promised that he would not create problems and asked his comrades not to worry. Shen Ye also thought that earlier Mikteti Kahiva himself pretended to be Phelan, but now this responsibility fell on him. After this, the impostors headed to the elven settlement, asking Phelan to hurry up, since they had already lost a lot of time. The main character ran as fast as he could, but he could hardly keep up with his new comrades. He was surprised at how powerful these creatures were. Only in the evening they arrived in the village. One of the elves said that in order to enter, they had to get permission from the head, but there were no risks in this because all they had to do was show the order. The impostor continued to say that the biggest risks were in the murder. He explained that the 3 of them would cover Phelan, who was supposed to kill the head of the village. Hearing this, the main character began to get nervous, believing that there was some kind of mistake. He could not believe that it was he who had to kill the head of the village. He looked at his comrade with suspicion. The imposters asked what the problem was and whether Phelan really didn't want to do this job. Shen Ye quickly pulled himself together and declared that his blade was already missing blood, so his comrades could completely rely on him in this matter. The imposters praised Phelan while the main character himself continued to be nervous and think that if he refused, they would immediately kill him. Then the guy thought that he was a real suicide bomber, since he was going to kill the head of the village on his territory. Now he understood why Mkteti Kakiva sent him to do this job. The guards who were protecting the elven village, seeing the approach of strangers, immediately demanded that they show them their orders. Everything went without problems. The imposters did not arouse suspicion, so the guard asked them to follow him because he was going to take them to the head of the village. Soon, the trusting guard showed the guests around the village and while giving them a tour, told them about the local customs. The locals were very happy to see new faces who also had a silver military medal. The beautiful elven girls couldn't help but notice the main character, which embarrassed him a little. Soon the guard brought the newly arrived elves to a large door and asked them to go inside, because the head already knew about their presence. The imposters asked Phelan to go meet the chief while they waited for him here. The guy had to agree with this, while thinking that he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Shen Ye didn't understand how he managed to get into the thick of the showdown between the elves and tenderness. The only thing that made the guy happy in this situation was the opportunity to gain superpowers after committing murder. Meanwhile, the main character had already entered the spacious, semi-dark room, the only source of light being the glow of the moon. I won't risk going further than Shen Ye because I've already seen the one he came to see. Near the large window stood the dark figure of a respected elf in this village, who was calmly reading some book. As soon as the head of the village felt the presence of the guest, he abruptly closed his book, causing a loud bang to echo throughout the room. After this, the man turned to the main character and greeted the soldier who returned from the front line. At this moment, Shen Ye received a system notification that his gate was equipped with the ability to conduct evaluation records, so he could look up information about other beings. The guy immediately saw that in front of him stood an elf, who was called the Spirit of 10,000 Forests, the heir to the throne of the ancient tree, the protector of the world of nightmares, a great magician and the fifth world leader. At the same time, the main character only had the status of a polite person, which did not add to his confidence at all against the background of all those records about the head of the elven village. Now Shen Ye realized how naive he had been, because even those three imposters who were much stronger did not dare to meet this creature face to face. The main character was sure that he would definitely not be able to kill the head of the village, who had so many statuses. The guy began to tremble with fear, simultaneously indignant at the fact that Mkteti Kakiva had arranged all this. Surprisingly, the head of the elven village immediately thanked the soldier for his contribution to the fight against evil spirits, and suggested that he have a good rest. The man said that they had arranged a celebratory banquet in honor of the returning heroes, so the main character should go and enjoy it. At that very moment, the girls teleported to the festive table where other imposters were already sitting. The imposters asked that their comrade enjoy the food and rest for now, since it was still too early to do anything. Shen Ye felt that he could not trust the evil spirits in the form of elves, and continuing in the same spirit was tantamount to waiting for death, so he had to come up with something. Suddenly, an elf girl approached the main character and offered him to dance. The guy was very surprised by this sudden offer. The girl looked intently into the guy's eyes and insisted that it was a great honor for her to have the opportunity to dance with the hero. Tell him so. Still, Shen Ye agreed, but warned that he did not dance very well. The elf promised that she would help him. After this, the main character began to dance, carefully watching his every movement. He was a little embarrassed because he thought that he had failed at everything. However, the girl herself did not pay attention to this and seemed to be very happy with the opportunity provided. Shen Ye was very sorry that he would soon die, and also that if it weren't for the imposters who set him up, he would have danced with this girl all his life. In the end, the main character decided that he urgently needed to come up with something to get out of the situation unharmed. After the dance, the girl asked why the guy was so silent like his battle brothers. She suggested that the battle had affected them so much. Shen Ye denied it and said that it was because he was a terrible dancer. After that, he asked the girl's name. It turned out that her name was Lenny. Then the guy asked if he could give the girl one gift. Lenny was delighted with this question and confidently declared that she would gladly accept it. However, before this, the girl asked the main character to take her bracelet as a token of gratitude and added that if he disappointed her in the future, he should return the bracelet. Shen Ye agreed to this condition and then suddenly walked to the other end of the room. Then the guy climbed onto the table and loudly addressed everyone present, asking for their attention. He wanted to show them a trick. The next moment, the protagonist confidently declared that he was a human and could change his shape. Lenny was delighted and asked to demonstrate it quickly. The other elves were also interested in this statement because they had never seen people. At the same time, the imposters did not understand what Phelan was doing, but they believed that his skill of turning into a human would help them get closer to the elves. Meanwhile, the main character took hold of his crown of pale shadows and asked everyone to watch carefully what would happen next. The next moment, the guy threw off the precious jewelry and immediately turned into an ordinary person. The main character gave the crown itself as a gift to Lenny, calling her a beautiful girl along the way. Everyone present was delighted by this transformation. They were very surprised by Shen Ye's hair and ears. However, this was not the end. While all attention was focused on him, the guy began to think about the fact that he could become a man if he took off the crown. Suddenly he pointed to his comrades and stated that his brothers also possessed similar magic. The imposters did not expect this at all. Shen Ye continued confidently saying that if they took off their crowns, they would become evil spirits. As soon as the elves heard this, they immediately began to look at the imposters with anger because they simply could not ignore such a statement. Without thinking twice, they pointed their spears at the guests and ordered them to take off their crowns. The imposters were discouraged and did not know what to do. Meanwhile, Shen Ye had already summoned the gate and told everyone present that after his 3 comrades changed, he would return back. After that, the guy said goodbye to Lanny and walked through the door despite the elves trying to stop him. At that very moment, the doors began to disappear, which greatly surprised everyone present. They did not understand what kind of magic it was. Lanny was very upset by the disappearance of the protagonist and hoped that he would soon return while the rest of the elves intended to catch the imposters. A few moments later, the vine had firmly grown around the evil spirits that were posing as elves. Now they would have no way to escape. The vine was squeezing the villains tightly, while someone declared that he would like to play with the imposters some more. The head of the village, who appeared out of nowhere, realized that the undead wanted to infiltrate his settlement, but did not expect that the man was working on 2 fronts. One of the imposters maintained his image to the very end and insisted that there had been a misunderstanding, since they even had orders that confirmed that they were soldiers of the elven army. However, as soon as the crown of pale shadows was removed from the villain, it was finally confirmed that he was a real undead. He had nothing to say to this. The village chief realized that the crown contained transformation magic, which surprised him greatly. He was also afraid that with the help of this item, undead spies could infiltrate the village and find out their weaknesses. Then the man looked back, and turning to Shen Ye, who had not been here for a long time, thanked him for his help and said that he was in his debt. Lenny also looked at where the main character had recently stood and regretfully accepted the fact that he would not return. Meanwhile, Shen Ye was already in that very dark corridor and was surprised that the gate he summoned could adapt to the surrounding environment. Suddenly, the guy noticed a dark figure that was visible in the distance. He immediately remembered whose fault it was that he found himself in a very difficult situation. Then the main character turned to Mikteti Kahiva with displeasure and asked if the skeleton had really been feasting there while he was fighting. It seemed that the skeleton was very surprised by the guy's appearance. The monster was very surprised that Shen Ye was still alive. The protagonist immediately began to accuse the creature of deliberately giving him the crown of pale shadows. Mikteti Kahiva asked to tell how the guy managed to survive and promised to give a reward for this, but Shen Ye was still unhappy and continued to blame the skeletons for the fact that he almost died because of him. Suddenly, a system notification appeared in front of the guy that the other side of the contract had prepared a powerful undead spell for him, which was very valuable. Shen Ye was very unhappy that the skeleton tried to bribe him with gifts and threatened that he would greatly regret it. Then the monster said that he gave the boy the crown because he was a human, and if the main character went there, he would have a chance to survive because humans and elves were allies. As an apology, Mikteti Kahiwa decided to give Shen Ye the Nightmare Heritage Crystal, which contained the 3 most developed Nightlife talents. The guy could choose one of them and integrate it into his soul. The skeleton said that this crystal was considered a very valuable treasure that his enemies wanted to get, but the monster wanted to give it to the man, because then no one would guess that the crystal was now in his possession. Shen Ye thought that this gift was useful, so he decided to forgive the monster for the first time, but insisted that there would be no next time. As soon as the main character used this crystal, a huge skeleton of a king sitting on a throne appeared in front of him. Immediately after this, three bright spheres headed towards the guy, and an ominous voice asked him to make his choice. The skeleton insisted that Shen Ye only needed to choose one of the talents and take it for himself. The first talent was called Dark Whisper, which allowed using corpses as a basis to summon a dead person from hell and ask him about everything he knew, because death gave the deepest knowledge. The second talent is Holy Skeleton Body. According to the description, any force that could kill the user would cause their body to turn into a holy corpse body, temporarily free from death, but only once a day for 5 seconds. The third talent, Resurrection of the Dead, allowed you to create fireballs and place them in the body of an undead who died in battle. Thanks to this, the fire of the soul would merge with the corpse and resurrect it. Shenya thought that he wouldn't need the resurrection of the dead, and with the body of a holy skeleton, he would only be able to dodge any attacks for 5 seconds, which was certainly not enough. The main character was sure that only by mastering the information he would be able to kill the enemy. So the talent Dark Whisper seemed the most desirable for him. Then the guy took the necessary crystal, after which a mysterious energy instantly enveloped him and penetrated into his very soul. Soon, everything ended. The main character was glad that now he could talk to the dead. Miktedi Kahiva asked if the guy had already made his choice. The skeleton was surprised that Shenya made such a choice, because in his memory, most people chose the third item to increase their combat component. After this, Miktedi Kahiva asked the main character to tell about what actually happened in the world of elves, because it was very important for him. After listening to everything from beginning to end, the skeleton stated that the head of the village that Shenya mentioned was the strongest high priest of the elves. Now the guy understood why he had so many titles. The monster also stated that the 3 undead knights that the elves had caught would no longer pose a threat to him. Miktedi Kahiva thought that this was his only chance, so without explaining anything, he quickly ran into the depths of the dark corridor, leaving the guy alone. Shenya realized that now he had to take care of him himself because every family and clan had their own dark places. At this point, an assessment of skills took place, thanks to which the main character received the skill of independence. With its help, it was possible to gain the trust of the enemy. Also, this skill could only be used once a day, and the target's overall stats could not exceed Shenya's stats more than twice. In addition, the bracelet that the elf Lanny gave the guy allowed him to increase his intelligence, so the main character thought that it was a very good thing. Overall, Shenya thought that he had done a good job today, since he had received a new technique, bracelet, and skill, and now he could return to the exam. Meanwhile, in the schoolyard, a physical skills test was taking place. The teacher announced that Chen Haoyu was next, so he should prepare himself. As soon as the necessary command was given, the guy ran forward with all his might, trying to avoid getting hit by the jets of purple water that were shooting out of the training ground. Shen Ye was rooting for his best friend and wishing him luck. Chen Haoyu thanked the protagonist for his support and assured him that he could handle everything since it was a trivial task. At that moment, a stream of water unexpectedly hit the guy right in the head, which made all his classmates laugh. They thought that the guy deserved it because he bragged a lot. As a result, the teacher gave this test a score of 71 and asked Chen Haoyu to be glad that it was not a real exam. After that, he called Shen Ye over. The main character stood at the starting line and, fully concentrated, prepared to hear the necessary command from the man. As soon as it sounded, the guy rushed forward at lightning speed, passing all obstacles. Classmates were very surprised by this speed and the fact that the paint simply could not keep up with the main character. They also couldn't help but notice that the guy had an overly relaxed posture, as if he was skating, and in general, he became more active after being discharged from the hospital. At this time, Shenya was thinking that all this was not so difficult, because he just needed to show a few elven techniques and then everything would work out. At this time, from afar, a mysterious man in dark glasses watched intently as the main character went through the obstacle course. He considered the main character a very interesting character. The second man said that this guy was first in class, and even though he missed the first exam, it was not the end. The man in dark glasses promised his interlocutor that if Shen Ye got the highest score on the spiritual ability test, he would give him a chance. The second man heard this and asked the head of Qian if this was too high a requirement, but the man with glasses remembered that the protagonist's spiritual power was quite mediocre. He then stated that it was necessary to first wait for the results and then look at the scores, because the average score was not enough. It was necessary to get the highest score on all indicators. Meanwhile, the teacher gave the protagonist's agility test the highest score and was very sorry that his student missed the first exam. Shunya insisted that he had not yet given up on the exams. After that, a break was announced. Chen Haoyu immediately suggested that his friend go out to eat, but the main character wanted to go to the library first, so he asked the guy to wait for him. Soon after, the boy was already sitting in class over his textbooks and thinking that he should forget about all the ordinary subjects that he studied in his world. The historical figures, events, and even literary works of this world were completely different from the protagonist's world, so he felt as if different memories were fighting in his head. At this moment, someone's foot appeared out of nowhere and moved towards Shanya at an incredible speed. The next moment, Sun Ming hit the desk where the protagonist was sitting with all his might, causing it to fly off to the side. This left Shanya momentarily confused. Sun Ming turned to his opponent with a sly smile on his face and reminded him that their recent conversation in the corridor was not over yet. Shenya immediately calmly asked if it was Zhao Yibing who asked the guy to come here. Sun Ming demanded that the protagonist not even pronounce the girl's name, after which he loudly and confidently snapped his fingers. After that, several more hostile guys entered the classroom, and Sun Ming continued to say that while Shenya was not in school, his strength had grown to the second level. The main character didn't give a damn about it, so he activated his new skill, Independence, without thinking. At that very moment, this skill was used on all the villains who were in the classroom, which noticeably calmed them down. The boys began to say that they actually didn't want to harm Shenya, but simply wanted to help Zhao Yibing, who many of them liked. However, the effect of the independence skill lasted only 10 seconds, so soon the villain came to his senses again and began to threaten the main character. The guy remained absolutely calm, and since his skill could only be used once a day, he decided to absorb it, thanks to which he earned 3 characteristic points. Shenya wanted to spend the points he earned on increasing his strength, but the system reported that he could redistribute another attribute point. As a result, the guy's strength increased by 4 points. Suddenly, one of the villains attacked the main character and grabbed him so that he would not escape, and Sun Ming could fight him. Meanwhile, Sun Ming, with a satisfied smile on his face, was already swinging his fist with all his might in order to attack Shenya, while asking how many ribs the guy was willing to sacrifice. The next moment, the villain attacked the protagonist, hitting him right in the chest. From the outside, it seemed that Shenya could not avoid serious injuries. Surprisingly, the protagonist looked not so much scared as very surprised, while Sun Ming was suddenly overcome with anxiety and confusion. Suddenly, the guy started screaming loudly and shaking in pain, because as a result of the unsuccessful attack, all the fingers on his right hand were broken. After this, the main character easily escaped from the villain's grasp. His strength, which was now several times greater than that of an average schoolboy, helped him do this. Then Shenya decided to teach the guy a lesson, who suddenly grabbed him and therefore punched him right in the face, causing him to fall to the floor. The other villains were amazed that the guy was able to remain unharmed after Sun Ming's blow and then break free from the grip. They did not understand how this was possible. The whole point was that strength as a basic characteristic combined many aspects such as the strength of limbs and bones, the strength of internal organs, and the 6 senses. Shenya was very unhappy that the scoundrels thought they could defeat him just because he missed one exam. Then he grabbed Sun Ming and said that he wouldn't be able to say hello if he switched to someone else. The guy immediately began to apologize and admit that he was wrong. To this, the main character calmly replied that the villains would not be able to receive forgiveness so easily because they humiliated others, beat them, and deprived them of a bright future. After that, Shenya attacked Sun Ming with all his might, causing him to immediately fly off to the side while screaming in pain. School children who were outside clearly heard screams and cries for help coming from one of the school classrooms. Of course, this attracted the attention of the teacher, who quickly identified the right class, ran inside and asked with displeasure what the children were doing there. Everyone immediately saw Shenya, who was sitting calmly surrounded by the defeated scoundrels, and everything around was stained with blood. The main character saw the teacher with tears in his eyes and was glad that he had finally come, after which he told him that the scoundrels had bullied him. The man was shocked by this statement because he clearly saw that his student had beaten up several guys, and now he was saying that he was the one being bullied. Zhao Yibing was also here and saw the consequences of her actions. The girl immediately admitted that she had miscalculated. She couldn't believe that all those guys couldn't deal with Shenya, who was all alone. The girl did not understand whether the main characters were really that strong, but she did not despair. and believed that this was not the end, because she could still ask for help. Suddenly, Zhao Yibing's friend approached her and asked if she had any regrets. The girl did not immediately understand what her friend meant. However, she admitted that if she had continued to be nice to Shen Ye, then perhaps they would still be friends and everything would be different. Zhao Yibing quickly dismissed these thoughts because the main character had caused a real showdown and injured the students, after which he definitely should not have been allowed to take the exams. In fact, this was all the girl needed, so it could be considered that her goal had been achieved, and now a bright future awaited her, unlike Shen Ye. Then Zhao Yibing, answering her friend's question, said that she hated herself for not understanding what a scoundrel the main character was before. Suddenly, the girl noticed the wounded Sun Ming, who was staring at her as he was taken to the hospital. Zhao Yibing was not at all happy about this and mentally asked the guy not to stare at her like that. She really hoped that Sun Ming wouldn't tell her everything and drag her into this whole situation. Then Zhao Yibing saw the guy's lips move and immediately realized that he wanted to tell her something. Now she could only mentally ask him to remain silent. The girl was very afraid of the consequences for which she could be punished, so she even began to wish that Sun Ming would die right now, just so that he would not tell anyone anything. Still, Sun Ming managed to pronounce Zhao Yibing's name with his last strength, causing the corridor where the school children were crowded to immediately fall into absolute silence. Everyone immediately turned their gaze to the girl, not understanding how she was involved in this situation. Zhao Yibing didn't know at all what she should do. All this scared the girl very much, so she could not contain her emotions and began to cry. In the end, she made it look like she was very upset about what Shen Ye did to Sun Ming, and so she continued to cry and decided to call the police. Shen Ye immediately realized that the girl used this trick to make the other students turn against him. At this time, the teacher was only worried that, with the intervention of the police, they would have a lot of problems. After this, Teacher John asked all the students to return to their classes and the protagonist to follow him. The guy had to obediently submit to this. The principal walked around the school with Headmaster Chan and insisted that they had great students. The man replied that he had no doubt about it, but they had to meet the minimum requirements. Suddenly, a worried teacher approached the principal and told him that Sun Ming and Shen Ye had fought, which is why the police had arrived. The man was unhappy that his subordinate spoke about this in the presence of the head of Qian, but the teacher still showed the video that captured this fight. The director and head of Qian began to stare at the smartphone screen, surprised by what they saw there. At this time, the police officers who came to the school to sort out the situation also studied the provided video in detail. It turned out that the main character had prepared in advance and installed a camera. Now he was pretending to be innocent and explained it in such a way that he was afraid that the villains would kill him. This made the police's job easier. However, one of the police officers said that despite the presence of the video, the guy would still have to go with them to the police station. Then Teacher John intervened in the conversation and said that his student had simply encountered some oddities because he had already missed one exam, so he asked the police not to deprive the guy of a second attempt. The policeman assured that they would return the main character as soon as he checked everything. Shen Ye himself was only thinking about the fact that he was now constantly changing his characteristic points and hoped that his body would be able to adapt to this. Suddenly, the school principal entered the classroom and said that the boy was lucky that he was able to record everything on video. Otherwise, he would have already been expelled. Head Qian also intervened in the conversation and praised the protagonist for his excellent physical condition, adding that those scoundrels were definitely not his opponents. Teacher Jean was very surprised because he knew who this man was. The man then tells that he watched the video of the fight and immediately realized that Shen Ye was holding back so as not to kill his opponents. He valued this highly, so he gave the guy his business card. The protagonist, after reading the text on the business card, learned that this man, whose name was Qian Zhushan, was the director of a martial arts company. It was an organization that owned the heritage of various martial arts knowledge and had the property rights and copyrights to the secrets of martial arts. In simple terms, the main character could rise from rags to riches if he got into this company. It was a real road to heaven. Shen Ye then looked at the man standing in front of him and was very surprised by what he saw. It seemed to the guy that Qian Zhushan had no weaknesses at all, and no matter how he changed his characteristics, he would definitely not be able to defeat this man in battle. Qian Rushan then said that the evaluation system that allowed a person to be evaluated in all aspects analyzed that the guy had a composition strength of no less than 4.5 points. The man was interested in how many points Shen Ye had, Before answering, the main character thought that this man was very strong, so perhaps if he worked under his leadership, the killers would leave him alone. After that, the guy confidently stated that he had 5 points of strength. The director and teacher John were very surprised to hear this. Qian Rushan said that this was a very good result. Then Shen Ye asked if 5 points of strength was really that much. The man said that at the high school level, a strength score of 4.5 was a passing grade for their company, but a score of 5 points was a completely different matter. Qian Rushan continued to say that with a score of 5 points, the guy would be able to control some combat-type armor and also use standard-level ancient weapons. But first he had to pass a test. Shen Ye agreed with this, so the man promised that a person would come soon who would organize everything, and in the meantime, the main character needed to sort out things and prepare for the test. Finally, the company director asked what the guy's level of spiritual strength was. He was just curious, because his strength and agility indicators already met the company's standards. Shen Ye thought about it after hearing this question and felt that he couldn't be the best at everything. So saying that he only had 3 points of spiritual power was the best option. Qian Rushan felt as if he was struck by lightning when he heard that the protagonist had such a number of spiritual power points. The man was instantly dumbfounded with surprise and even dropped the cigarettes from his mouth. Everyone present in the room, including the police, were also shocked by this information because they did not expect that Shen Ye was such a genius. Qian Rushan was skeptical of what he heard, so he asked the protagonist to demonstrate his strength, since with spiritual power of this level, he could even move objects with the power of thought. Without wasting any time, the guy added characteristic points to his spiritual power and was able to easily move a chair in front of everyone using telekinesis. Seeing this, the police captain ordered his subordinates to leave here. The men were very surprised and did not catch. Could they really just leave everything as it was? The captain recalled that Shen Ye's strength level was 5. He had a good physique, his agility was 4, and his spiritual power, as it turned out, was 3 points. This meant that the main character had a great future ahead of him, and the police had no business here. Shen Ye was very pleased to hear this. Qian Rushan was very pleased that the level of the protagonist's spiritual power was confirmed. He rejoiced without holding back his emotions and admitted that he did not expect this at all. The man even sang a couple of verses of famous songs for which he received praise from the director and teacher. After this, the company director asked the strangers to leave so that he could talk to Shen Ye alone. Of course, everyone agreed with this, so soon only Qian Rushan and Shen Ye remained in the office. Suddenly, the man turned to the main character and calmly asked what his ideal was. Shen Ye, without thinking twice, replied that Qian Rushan was his ideal. The man was pleased with this answer, but he was interested in what the guy wanted most. At that moment, Shen Ye thought for a moment and answered with a serious voice that what he didn't want most was to be a weakling and wanted to be able to protect himself and his family. The director of the company also liked this answer, so he said that now the guy was closest to his dream, but he should try to harm him right now. The protagonist slightly misunderstood these words, so he began to verbally insult the man. Then Qian Rushan directly stated that the guy should try to attack him. The guy was very surprised by this request, but he couldn't refuse, so he quickly switched his attribute points to strength and prepared to attack. The next moment, Shen Ye suddenly swung his fist and tried to attack Qian Rushan. His strength was so great that his fist literally cut through the air. Noticing this, the company director was very surprised, but this did not make him lose his vigilance and concentration. Suddenly, Shen Ye for some reason became frozen in place and couldn't even move, so his attack was not completed. His body seemed to be frozen by something. The man said that it was a type of magical art that could neutralize an attacker, and having learned this, the main character would definitely be able to protect himself. Then Qian Rushan said that this was not all, and taking out his pistol asked the guy to watch carefully. After this, the man fearlessly put a loaded gun to his head. This alarmed the protagonist, but he continued to watch as he was told. The next moment, a loud shot rang out. The bullet hit Qian Rushan with great speed, causing him to lean to the side. Because of this, Shen Ye was very nervous. However, everything was fine. The man said that this was a different kind of magical art from the company's secret archives. According to the director, this magical art was capable of resisting various hidden weapon attacks and even resisting a sniper rifle. The guy was very impressed by all this, so he said that martial arts were not some at Qian Rushan liked this phrase, so he officially invited Shen Ye to join the Hidden Dragon plan. It was a supernova restoration project by the company, so the man wanted to recommend the main character to the top 3 high schools in the world, but he had to pass the entrance exam. Qian Zhushan continued to say that ordinary people could not access this exam because it had long been monopolized by the world clans. The guy did not understand what clans were being talked about. The man said that clans were those who inherited knowledge, sacred tools, and blood ties from the gods of ancient times. The knowledge of martial arts of large clans was much more extensive than that of a company. Hearing this, Shen Ye suddenly guessed that his grandfather in the past also belonged to these clans. Meanwhile, Qian Rushan continued to say that the Hidden Dragon plan was essentially looking for geniuses like the protagonist to help them enter the most prestigious educational institutions. In addition, the man promised that if the guy managed to get into one of the 3 best schools, the entire company would support him with resources and adjust his future career based on his characteristics. After this, the main character finally realized that in this world, strength was above all else, so he simply could not miss his chance and ignore such an offer. Shenye was sure that his family had also once been members of the clan, but for some reason his father had been exiled. In addition, the main character's mother begged for 4 types of medicine for recovery, but these drugs did not have much significance for the clan. Qian Rushan then said that if everything was okay, then Shenye should sign the documents and put in his fingerprint. Now the boy understood why in class, all the teachers emphasized the strength of the students, because humanity had to rely only on the strong so that civilization could continue to exist. Qian Zhushan asked the protagonist to think it over again, because other organizations wouldn't sit idly by either. Shen Ye replied that he would definitely join the man because he was the first to find him. The director of the company was glad to hear this, but since the main character was not yet an adult, he needed to contact his parents to sign the documents. He thought that he needed to hurry because other organizations could intercept Shen Ye, so he left right now but promised to return to the genius guy. Immediately after that, Qian Rushan ran away so quickly that it seemed like he had simply evaporated. The protagonist was amazed by this and believed that it was a real manifestation of Qian Zhushan's strength. Meanwhile, the satisfied school principal approached the boy and asked if everything was okay. Shen Ye said that he had already signed the documents, and Qian Zhushan went to his parents to discuss everything. The principal and teacher were very happy to hear this. Suddenly, the guy received a call from an unfamiliar number. He didn't even know who was bothering him, but he answered the call anyway. It turned out that the person calling him was Police Captain Luo Feichuan, who had learned some important information, and so he asked Shen Ye to come to the police station. Shen Ye couldn't ignore Luo Feichuan's request because he himself was interested in what the man found out. So very soon, the guy arrived at the police station. Capital invited the protagonist into his office and asked him to sit down at the table and look at something. The guy obeyed without objection, but now he was puzzled by the fact that for some reason, as soon as he entered the police station, he experienced an inexplicable feeling. Then the Capital showed a photo of a suspicious man who was standing on the roof of the hospital and said that at the time of the shooting, the main character was just in the hospital, so he was interested in whether the guy knew this man. After taking a closer look at the photo and thinking for a while, Shen Ye replied that he had never seen this man. Then Luo Feichuan continued to say in a serious voice that according to the forensic experts, this man was trying to activate something. The man also asked if the main character had anything unusual with him that day. The guy immediately understood what was being discussed, but was in no hurry to answer. He assumed that this suspicious man activated the curse of the Demon King statue, but he couldn't catch this man, and the statue turned to dust. There were no more leads. That is why the guy decided not to reveal information about the statue, so as not to arouse suspicion towards himself as the only survivor, and not to bring trouble upon himself. Still, the main character replied that he knew nothing. The man was surprised by this answer and even considered it strange, as if he already knew what the guy was not telling the whole story. He then asked if Shen Ye had any nausea, loss of consciousness, memory lapses, or other unusual symptoms. Because of this question, the guy assumed that the police captain might have known something, but the main character chose to continue to deny everything. Shen Ye also thought that ever since he entered the office, he had been overcome with a strange feeling as if someone was watching him. Suddenly, the boy said that he remembered something. He said that his backpack was open, although that day he definitely zipped it up when he left school. Hearing this, Luo Feichuan thought for a moment, then asked in the same frighteningly calm voice whether Shen Ye had checked his backpack. The guy started to get nervous, but still answered that he didn't do it, while thinking about what happened to this policeman and what he was going to do next. Then the guy switched all the characteristics to agility because he thought that in any case, He should have been ready to escape, but he assumed that the captain's skills would most likely suppress him. This caused some doubts in the main character, but he still did not give up on his ideas and continued to think everything over carefully. In the end, Shenye felt that he had to act without any hesitation, and as soon as difficulties arose, he decided to run away immediately. Suddenly, the tense silence that reigned in the office was interrupted by a telephone call, which alarmed the main character. The guy was scared, but he thought that he needed to hold on and just find a suitable chance when he could open the door, so he asked the man to answer the call. Luo Feichuan still answered the call, picking up the phone while addressing the guy and asking him not to move. The captain was taken aback by the surprise when he heard the voice of a stranger who threatened that the man would soon die. At that moment, a mysterious, ominous aura appeared in the office, which concentrated on the policeman Shen Ye, who did not understand what was happening. He immediately assumed that this was the work of another assassin. However, this attack was aimed solely at Captain Luo Feichuan. The guy then assumes that this was the same technique that Qian Jushan was talking about. Meanwhile, the policeman did not understand what was happening and assumed that his opponent was outside the police station. That is why the man suddenly jumped up from his seat and fearlessly jumped out of the window, smashing the glass into pieces along the way. At that very moment, an alarm was activated, informing everyone in the police station that they were under attack. The security system voice also reported that an attacker had entered the police station, so personnel who were not involved in the battle should find a safe place to hide. Meanwhile, the main character stood motionless in place and looked out the window. The guy did not understand where the ocean was from and why everything around was blood red. Shen Ye saw the strange man and realized that it was he who called the police station. The scoundrel claimed that Luo Feichuan had killed too many members of his church and therefore had to be punished. The police captain reacted calmly to this statement and replied that if the man had something to say, he should have hurried, because he was a little busy right now. To this, the scoundrel with a crazy look said that he had nothing to talk about with corpses, after which he used his force. Shen Ye was shocked by what was happening and therefore did not even try to interfere. He only waited to see what would happen next. Suddenly, the main character saw order in front of him, the familiar urban landscape, and realized that he had returned. But the police captain and the scoundrel were nowhere to be seen. Then the guy again felt that strange feeling of hopelessness that reigned in the office and therefore even assumed that there was a ghost somewhere here. In order to test this, Shen Ye activated the necromancer's talent, Whisper of Darkness. But in order to use it, the soul had to return to the body in order to be able to answer all of the guy's questions. Shen Ye immediately began to look around, wondering whether it was even possible to find the much-needed corpse in the police captain's office. Suddenly, the main character heard an unfamiliar, ominous voice, which for some reason thanked him. This scared the guy very much. However, he quickly pulled himself together and turned in the direction from which the voice came and asked who was speaking. The voice that came from the closet continued to say that he did not expect at all that he would be able to return to his body and talk to the guy. Shen Ye realized that there was a corpse in this closet. The protagonist also felt that this voice was familiar to him. Shen Ye quickly had a guess that shocked him. With a trembling hand, the guy began to open the cabinet, while the voice continued to say that Shen Ye was one of the hunters, but he was killed by mistake and branded as prey. Opening the door, the main character was horrified to find the mutilated corpse of Captain Luo Feichuan in the closet. With a trembling voice, the guy asked the dead man if he really was a police captain. Luo Feichuan's corpse confirmed with an emotionless voice that it was indeed him. This frightened Shen Ye even more, but he still asked how it all happened. The captain replied that he was killed by the same man in glasses from the photo. He went on to say that his killer only needed to show dexterity to kill him without preparation, and in the end, the villain took the form of a police captain and lured the main character into the department. After that, Shen Ye asked what the killer's goal was. Sol Luo Feichuan replied that she didn't know, but that man was definitely looking for some kind of answer. The guy immediately realized that the legendary creature Demon King had never been defeated, so now he wanted to know how he managed to survive. Shen Ye also assumed that the captain's killer used a special technique to take away corpses. Luo Feichuan did not understand what was being discussed, and then the guy said that recently everything around the site instantly changed, but quickly returned, however. The body of the imposter and that attacker was not there. Luo Feichuan found it ironic that the hunter who pretended to be the prey unknowingly brought trouble upon himself. He then explained that what the main character described was not a technique at all, but an anomaly. It was another world that suddenly came into contact with our world, surrounding, absorbing, or taking away living beings in a certain territory. And what was above this and even more dangerous was called a disaster. Shen Ye was very impressed and interested by what he heard, and immediately asked the captain to explain what a disaster was. The man said that it was a powerful being from another world that used various techniques to suddenly appear in the main world, which was accompanied by the emergence of a real hell. Next, Luo Feichuan asked the guy if he knew about the city of Jiangnan. The main character replied that according to one legend, an earthquake occurred there that razed the entire city to the ground. Hearing this, the man said that the earthquake was just an explanation for ordinary people, but in fact it was one of the disasters when more than 3 million people died in one moment. After that, the police captain said that the anomaly was only temporary and the killer could come back for Shen Ye at any moment, so they had to hurry. The protagonist was worried that he was still in danger, but Luo Feichuan told him that the guy should immediately go to the weapons room on the 3rd floor and write the password on the silver wall. This password was so long that the main character had to take a pen and paper from the desk drawer to write it down, because simply remembering it was impossible. The man continued to say that outside the armory there was a special pen with which one had to write the password on the wall, and if Shen Ye hurried, he would be able to escape. After this, the police captain fell silent, because his soul had already told the main character everything and left his body. Now it was no surprise to the guy that other police officers didn't want to take on his case, because even as an officer they could die because of it. While picking up Captain Luo Feichuan's hat, the protagonist wondered whether he should reveal the identity of the killer, but he soon decided that there was no point in doing so. Shen Ye suspected that perhaps the police had accomplices of the killer, and with such power they could easily take his life. So all the guy could do now was follow the captain's instructions and go to the 3rd floor to get protection. The protagonist admitted with annoyance that with his current strength, he would not be able to avenge Luo Feichuan, but in the future, he would definitely carry out his revenge. Finally, Shen Ye mentally wished for the police captain's soul to rest in peace. The guy tightly clutched the piece of paper with the password in his hand, which indicated that he had not come to terms with this situation. Suddenly, the main character heard a knock on the door and then a voice that informed him that an anomaly had occurred, and therefore everyone now had to go downstairs to undergo testing. Shen Ye didn't react to the knock on the door and the unfamiliar voice behind it, so soon it slowly opened. Several police officers entered the office and again asked the main character to leave, since after what happened, everyone had to undergo a check. Captain Wang then asked his subordinates to go down while he dealt with Luo Feichuan and Shen Ye. The police officers obeyed the captain's order without question. When the man was left alone, he began to talk about how he knew that the main character was afraid of something, but now he was safe. In addition, the police promised that he would take care of the guy. After that, the police captain slowly walked along the cabinets, in one of which the body of Captain Luo Feichuan was located. Suddenly, Captain Wang stopped near one of them, as if he sensed something was wrong. The man realized without even looking that Luo Feichuan's corpse was moving, so he loudly asked if this was Shen Ye's work. Having received no answer, Captain Wang began to run around the entire office at great speed, looking into every corner as if he was looking for something. In the end, he searched the entire room, but there was no one there except him, so he assumed that the main character had already run away somewhere. Captain Wang was upset about this because he had killed so many people but screwed up in front of a 15-year-old kid. It was just terrible for him. The man contacted his subordinates via radio and said that he suspected that Shen Ye was involved in this incident, so he should immediately send out notices and detain the guy. After this, the man left the office, and the Central Intelligence System reported that it had completed its work, and therefore everyone should gather in the hall to undergo testing. As soon as the danger had passed, a gate appeared in the semi-dark room, which was owned by the main character. Carefully peeking out from behind the door, Shen Ye saw that the killer had already left and thought that he was right when he thought that the scoundrel had accomplices. Then the guy thought that he could be in the world of nightmares forever and be safe there, but then he would lose the chance to punish the killers. That is why the main characters climbed out through the broken window, intending to reach the 3rd floor and tell everything to the people Captain Luo Feichuan trusted. The main character very quickly reached the desired floor and climbed into the room through an open window. Looking around, he saw at the end of the corridor a large iron door, which from a distance resembled an elevator door. Shen Ye remembered that he needed to take a pen and write the required code that Luo Feichuan gave him directly on the wall. Suddenly, the protagonist heard someone's voice behind him, who stated that he now knew exactly what was the cause of the noise he had recently heard. The guy immediately froze in fear and turned back slightly to see Captain Wang, who was emitting an ominous aura. The man asked what Shun Ye was doing here. The main character began to quickly write down the necessary password on the wall, getting nervous at the same time, and explaining that he would soon have to take exams and therefore the teacher gave him several problems that he had to solve quickly. The scoundrel, of course, did not believe it, but he was more interested in why the guy was standing near the emergency device that connected the central government of the world. Captain Wang did not understand who could give the main character the password to the door, but he thought that it was impossible to allow the code to be completely written down, so the villain threw his club in order to attack the guy. Without being distracted from rewriting the password, Shun Ye reacted in time and summoned a gate that appeared in the path of the flying clubs, and thus was able to protect him from the attack. Seeing this, Captain Wang personally rushed to attack, asking along the way what kind of door it was and assuming that it was his opponent's ability. Meanwhile, the main character felt the pressure that was being exerted on the gate and was glad that it was reacting to changes in the environment. Otherwise, he would have already died. In order to attack the protagonist, Captain Wang first had to remove the obstacles in the form of the mysterious door, so right now he intended to attack it with all his might. In the end, this blow turned out to be quite powerful. The man was able to seriously damage the iron door, and it seemed that his next attack would leave the main character without protection. Surprisingly, the guy, despite his opponent, removed his gates himself, continuing to rewrite the password. Captain Wang thought that this was a great opportunity to kill his opponent, so he once again accelerated and headed straight towards Shun Ye. The next moment, the main character, having managed to react in time, again summoned the gate right in front of the villain's face, causing him to crash into it with his head and receive serious injuries. This caused the man to be pierced by a strong pain, which almost knocked him off his feet. He could not believe that these gates could also kill, and therefore was very indignant. Meanwhile, Shun Ye finally managed to finish writing down the password he needed, and it seemed that now behind these doors he would be able to find someone who would help him. After successfully verifying the password, the most powerful artificial intelligence of the Kunlun world government began to check the police station and discovered the body of Captain Luo Feichuan as well as the fake identity of Captain Wang. That was why Kunlun summoned the company's head Qian Rushan to immediately take all necessary measures and kill the enemy. Shun Ye was very surprised by this. The artificial intelligence also stated that in 30 seconds, the killer posing as Captain Van would be executed. But the villain himself did not think so and intended to finish what he had started. In order to hold out for these 30 seconds, the main character called the gate, hoping that he will be able to hide in the other world of nightmares for this time. Unfortunately, Captain Wang managed to grab the guy by the arm and not let him escape. After that, the villain swung his fist to finish off the main character right now. Shun Ye clearly saw how the man's fist that carried destructive power was getting closer and closer to him, while there were still a long 25 seconds left before Qian Rushan appeared. Suddenly, the main character saw a bright light that began to absorb the villain, simultaneously tearing off Captain Van's mask. It turned out that the reason for this was Qian Rushan, who, using his abilities, literally tore the villain apart with one incredibly powerful blow. Shun Ye was shocked by what happened, and for a while he simply couldn't react. Fortunately, the blood splashes didn't stain the guy at all. Meanwhile, Qian Rushan, with an unusually pompous expression, said that in their business, the most important weapon was speed. Then the man asked if it was really cool that he had appeared. The main character confirmed this with admiration and thanked the head of the company for his help. After this, our heroes moved to the office of the Ministry of State Security to discuss what had happened. Qian Rushan was very interested in how the guy knew about the password. Shun Ye said that Luo Feichuan gave it to him in advance and said that if something happened, he should use it immediately. Hearing this, the man immediately assumed that the police captain probably knew that he was being targeted by the Church of Silence organization, to which the people who caused the anomaly belonged. Then Shun Ye's expression suddenly changed because he felt sorry for Captain Luo Feichuan. Qian Rushan agreed with this and said that he had only recently met him, but the man was definitely for justice, so it was probably because of his kind heart that he brought trouble upon himself. After this, the man said that the main character was very lucky because he almost fell into the hands of a killer who belonged to the League of Killers, but unfortunately it will not be possible to identify the customer. Then the guy assumed that the customer was a rich man because the services of a killer who could kill a police captain were probably expensive. Jian Zhushan did not understand why this customer wanted the death of a schoolboy like Shen Ye. Then the main character asked what Kunlun was, which appeared after he wrote the password, and why Captain Luo Fei Chuan did not ask him to help deal with the killer. The man said that it was the central intellectual system of the world government, which usually did not deal with such trivial matters and could only provide assistance after entering the correct password. In response to the protagonist's second question, Qian Rushan suggested that Luo Feichuan simply did not know about the problem with Shun Ye's weapons and did not understand at all what this meant. Then the girl, who suddenly appeared in the office, said that Luo Feichuan's steel prosthesis, which was considered his weapon, was infected with a computer virus, which made it impossible to launch. The girl continued to say that as soon as the captain died, everything returned to normal. So it was obvious that this was the work of a person who knew Luo Feichuan well. Shen Ye realized that the captain was conducting an investigation, left him his business card, and even after his death continued to guide him. And when he met the enemy, he did not give up even though his weapon was malfunctioning. Suddenly, Qian Rushan said that the protagonist was now a member of his company, and today he would teach him the first lesson that the boy needed to learn. He went on to say that Shen Ye had to always be on guard because people were scarier than monsters. The main character took these words absolutely seriously. You see, he already knew that it was the absolute truth, so he assured the director of the company that he would remember it. Qian Rushan praised the guy and then asked him to follow him because they had to meet their parents. On the way, Shen Ye asked what they would do with the two scoundrels who were still in the anomaly. The man replied that more professionally trained people would handle this matter so as not to take risks and not fall into an anomaly. The company director also told about a guy who came out of the anomaly and looked absolutely normal, but in fact, only human skin remained, underneath which a real monster was hiding. Eventually the monster began to run amok and it was very difficult to catch it. So now the man preferred to deal with more ordinary people than to get involved with anomalies. Suddenly, Qian Rushan fell silent and stopped abruptly, as if some very important thought had occurred to him. Without wasting any time, he quickly called his subordinate and asked him to check on the girl named Xiao Mengyu. He was interested in this girl's connection with Captain Luo Feichuan. Very soon a reply came from his subordinate, which greatly surprised Qian Rushan and even seemed to make him nervous. Meanwhile, Shen Ye, based on what he heard, was wondering who this Xiao Mengyu was and assumed that she was somehow connected to the murdered police captain. Soon there was a meeting with Shen Ye's parents who, after hearing everything, wanted to talk to their son alone so that he could then give his answer. The woman told the guy that he was actually a descendant of the great family, since his father was from a side branch of the Shen family. Shen Ye knew that this family was one of the few Wu families that had divine heritage and artifacts. The woman then said that her husband was also a genius, but due to an unfortunate set of circumstances, he left for this city, after which he met her. The grandfather was unhappy with this, which is why the man renounced the family. After this, the protagonist's father said that his son's talents already surpassed those of ordinary people, so it was quite possible for his grandfather to recognize him as his grandson, and then he would become the descendant of an aristocratic family. The man also warned that if Shen Ye joined the organization, he would no longer be able to touch the family secrets, so now he had the right to choose any of them that he and his mother would support. It was quite a difficult choice for the guy because he didn't want to upset his parents, but he still declared his desire to join the organization. The main character's mother was surprised and asked if her son had thought it all through, because if his grandfather acknowledged him, he would no longer have any worries in life. Shen Ye replied that he didn't want his parents to humiliate themselves and ask their grandfather for such a thing. The guy thought that since his father could handle it, he could handle it too. Then the parents said that it was their son's life, so they respected his decision. Shen Ye was glad of this understanding and asked them to call Qian Rushan. The boy then recalled that over the years his parents had visited that family only a few times, and each time one part of the family treated them well, while the other looked at them with cold contempt. The only happy moments Shen Ye remembered were when he was a child playing with his friends. In his past life, he was used to the cold and indifference, and only now did he feel true, sincere love. Soon, all the documents were signed, and therefore Qian Zhushan officially congratulated the protagonist on joining the organization. The guy was happy about this, and believed that they did not need such a heartless family as Shen. Meanwhile, Zhao Yibing sat in the empty hospital corridor, happily uploading videos of Sun Ming's beating to the internet to attract more attention and criticism. In addition, the insidious girl specially came to this hospital and took a photo with the injured guy so that Shen Ye would soon receive his punishment and his reputation would be tarnished. At the same time, she wanted to remain innocent. Zhao Yibing mentally asked the protagonist not to blame her because it was his fate. The girl believed that from now on, Shen Ye would not be able to enter high school, and in the future, he would be a scumbag while she would become an abyss that he would not be able to jump over. Suddenly, these dreams were interrupted by a sound notification. A message came to Zhao Yibing's phone. It stated that the content that the girl had published was considered slanderous, and therefore the website had already removed the information and asked her to stop spreading rumors, otherwise the matter would end up in court. Zhao Yibing was shocked and couldn't believe that there was evidence that the protagonist acted in self-defense. She also didn't understand how the school reacted to this. It turned out that there was already a message from the director on the school's website, congratulating Shen Ye on signing a contract with the organization ahead of schedule. The girl, seeing this, was absolutely depressed and did not understand how the main character managed to sign a contract with the organization and why she was not in his place. On the same day, Shen Ye arrived at the main office of the martial arts company, which was both a huge multi-story building. While going up the elevator, Qian Zhushan told the guide that the situation related to the police station had been resolved. Many people had died in the battle and the survivors had been rewarded. The man himself had received 5 merits for the murder. The main character didn't know what it was, so the company director said that the merits could be used as currency to exchange for special items, such as combat equipment, materials, or weapons. At this moment, the protagonist received a message that he had made an important contribution in the battle, and therefore the government had adopted a method of encouragement so that in the coming days, Shen Ye could receive his reward. While our heroes were climbing up to the 105th floor, Qian Zhushan said that middle school students were just laying the foundation, and only in high school did they learn real professional techniques, so the guy shouldn't rush. The man then said that since the main character was now a member of the company, he could move freely around the building, treating it like his home, and of course receive a monthly salary. Afterwards, Shen Ye was greeted by a girl named Zhu Manling, who congratulated him on joining the martial arts company. The girl on the big TV screen thanked the guy for his work and hoped that he would increase his strength because this world was very dangerous, but it was worth fighting for. The protagonist immediately remembered that Xu Muling was an actress that Shen Ye really liked and was therefore delighted that she recorded a congratulatory video for him. Also looking around, the guy saw that everything in this room, from flowers to bed linen and clothes, almost everything here was loved by Shen Ye. The main character was surprised that all this was for the sake of some new recruit and for the sake of increasing his strength. From the height of the 105th floor, Shen Ye looked at the city and thought about who wouldn't want to stay on top of the clouds and whether that guy in the clouds was really a real hero. After that, the guy decided that today at 12 o'clock he would again plunge into the world of nightmares in order to get a grade. He had to become stronger because the entrance exams would be held in a few days. Soon the clock hands showed exactly 12 o'clock at night, which meant that the time had come. Shen Ye, as planned, summoned the gate to go to the nightmare world. Without crossing the threshold, the guy suddenly saw many bone fragments of different sizes, which surprised him very much. He immediately asked what happened. Then the main character remembered that he couldn't just enter the nightmare world, otherwise it would affect the evaluation conditions. Suddenly from the darkness, the familiar voice of Miktedi Kahiva was heard, who seeing Shen Ye began to ask him to quickly save him because he was dying. The guy was very surprised and didn't understand how the skeleton had gotten to this point. The monster asked the main character to give him medicine, but there was none left. Hearing these disappointing words, Miktedi Kahiva thought that it was all over for him. He could not believe that he would die here and considered it complete absurdity. Shen Ye thought that this monster was still a good partner and it was necessary to try to save him. So the guy asked the skeleton to hold out until he returned. 2 hours had passed since that moment. Miktedi Kahiva continued to wait, but he believed that the end was about to come for him. Suddenly, in the middle of the dark corridor, that same iron door appeared, which made the monster happier than ever. Tired and worried, Shen Ye reported that he had already returned, but the door was too small and he could not enter. Miktedi Kahiva did not understand what the guy was doing for so long. The main character said that in order to save the skeleton, he bought a huge vat filled with grape sugar and a solution of calcium gluconate, and if the monster can climb in and lie in it, he will definitely regain his strength. Miktedi Kahiva, did not have time to give his answer because the world of nightmares suddenly shook as if from a strong earthquake. The main character immediately asked what was happening. The alarmed monster said that his enemies were about to burst in because there was a secret passage here and outside his cemetery, which was attacked by people and elves. The skeleton also said that the battle was not over yet, but he was very weak, so he gave the guy a spatial ring, which he should put on quickly. As soon as Shenya fulfilled the monster's request, the ring immediately began to suck in Mikteti Kahiva and all of his broken bones. Soon the spatial ring absorbed the creature down to its very last and smallest piece. This was just in time, because as soon as the main character began to close the gate, a loud explosion was heard on the other side. The guy thought that it was very dangerous because if he had been hit by the shockwave, he would have definitely died. After this, Shenya turned to the skeleton and asked if he had hidden in the ring of Mikteti Kahiva, who confirmed this and said that the spatial ring could not store living beings, but he was not alive. Then the main character began to move Mikteti Kakiva into the vat, while saying that he saved him and therefore should have received a reward. The skeleton immediately asked what the guy needed. Without thinking twice, Shenya replied that he wanted to go to the world in which the monster Mikteti lived. Kahiwa was shocked by this, but felt that he should not interfere with the protagonist's decision. The monsters also warned Shenya that his powerful treasures had almost exhausted their power, so his help was very limited. Then the guy thought about the fact that there was a cemetery outside the secret passage, and if he could pretend to be a dead warrior and walk around the battlefield, he could get good records. Then the main character asked the skeleton if he had anything of dead warriors that could hide human energy. Mikteti Kakiva immediately provided everything he had. For some time, the guy had to dig through a whole mountain of broken copper and iron fragments. But the monster insisted that these fragments were invulnerable to attacks on the battlefield so they could be useful to the main character. Soon, Shenya found suitable equipment for himself, as well as a tablet with an inscription stating that it was used to summon a skeletal horse. Mikteti Kahiva praised the guy for having already studied the energy of death and decided to give him a mask as well. Shenya did not understand what it was needed for. The monster assured that it would help stabilize the high-level deadly energy, so the guy should put it on along with the rest of his equipment, and then other dead people would definitely not be able to see him. Then Mikteti Kahiwa said that now Shenya looked like a real dead warrior. He also advised the guy to use the tablet because perhaps he could summon a skeleton horse. The main character immediately imagined how he would sit on a skeleton horse and pretend to be a dead warrior, and if danger came, he would simply run away. As soon as all the preparations were completed, the guy still dared to enter the gate. But before that, Mikteti Kahiva demanded that the guy not dare to die, because if the spatial ring is stolen, he will definitely disappear. After this, the main character was completely absorbed in the world of nightmares, and at the end only managed to promise that he would try not to die. Shenya cautiously entered the nightmare world and looked around, surprised by the destruction that had occurred after the explosion. Trying to get through the rubble, the guy suddenly remembered that last time he received a sword from the elves, which would now be very useful to him for protection. After some time, the main character finally managed to get out of the cave, which was already in another world. At that moment, the guy saw in front of him a multitude of cold weapons that were directed at him. Shenya did not expect this at all. The guy was surprised when he saw people, because there should have been an undead camp here. He quickly realized that the people had already won the battle and were now looking at him in a not at all friendly way. As soon as Shenya heard that the knights wanted to kill him, he took off his mask and loudly declared that he was a human. The knight with a scar on his face did not want to listen to the undead, who, in his opinion, were trying to deceive him, and therefore already swung his sword in order to kill his enemy. The man still attacked the main character, but he managed to get a small blade in time and defend himself from the deadly blow. The knight was very surprised when he saw this weapon because he knew that it was called the Light of the Night and belonged to people. The system informed the boy that only nobles whose souls had never been defiled by the undead could possess this blade. The ability to wield this weapon was a special privilege, thanks to which the boy could gain the favor of those around him. Capital immediately informed his subordinates that Shenya was definitely one of them, so they all had to return to investigating the remains of the undead. After this, the man asked the guy if he needed their help, while demonstrating an unusual hand gesture that caused bewilderment in the main character. Shenya knew that this harshness meant, "I love you," and therefore he could not believe that in this world, people trusted strangers so much when they first met. The guy quickly dismissed the idea because he noticed that the man was staring at his mask, so he assumed that this gesture indicated a problem. The main character assumed that the knight felt threatened by this mask, so the guy said that he found himself in a rather difficult situation and would not refuse help. Hearing this, the man visibly tensed up and said that he understood everything and was therefore ready to give the main character a combat bag. Shunye was glad that he had managed to divert all suspicion from himself and thanked the man named Luo Ming for his help. Suddenly, a loud voice of a horseman was heard nearby, ordering everyone to move aside and make way for the horses. One of the riders asked Luo Ming with displeasure when to send his soldiers on their way, since there was little time left. The man said that on the way, he met a guy outside the tomb. Hearing this, the rider immediately ordered to seize the main character, because even the owner of the sword Nightlight could be a servant of the undead. The man wanted to know what the mission of this spy was. Shenye turned to the rider with displeasure and asked who he was and why he was interested in his mission. The man replied that he was the ruler of the palace of the Southern Legion and threatened that he would not kill the guy right away, because first he would skin him and then ask him for all the information. Shenye did not agree with these conditions at all, so he quickly took out his blade while simultaneously summoning a gate right at his feet. The man, seeing that the main character was not going to surrender voluntarily, loudly ordered his subordinates to kill him, after which the knights rushed to attack. The soldiers began to wave their weapons, wanting to kill the spy and carry out the orders of their ruler. This caused clouds of dust to rise around. As soon as the soldiers stopped and the dust cleared, everyone saw that the main character had disappeared without a trace, as if it had never been there. The ruler was shocked and did not understand how this was possible. Someone suggested that the guy was able to somehow hide through a secret passage. Luo Meng suddenly revealed that there were rumors that some mercenaries also took part in the war. The man continued to say that these mercenaries were real masters who knew how to hide in the shadows and specialized in assassinations, and the ruler had just angered one of them. The man, hearing this, began to get very nervous and think that if Shenya suddenly returned and killed him, the outcome of the war would immediately change. The frightened ruler immediately began to leave, ordering his soldiers to leave immediately. Meanwhile, the safe and sound protagonist returned to his room, happy that he had thought of placing the gate under his feet in advance. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble. Then the guy asked McTeddy with displeasure, Kahiwa, couldn't he have warned him about the knights who were going to kill him? The skeleton replied that he didn't know that people had already reached these lands. Unexpectedly, the system assessed the protagonist as an independent person. That is, someone who was able to fully utilize the environment and overcome any difficulties. Shunye was not particularly pleased with this assessment. The system also reported that if the guy gets the same grade 3 times, he will have the opportunity to get a hidden skill. It turned out that the main character needed to get the independence grade 1 more time. The guy began to think about how he could activate such an assessment again. Based on the description, in a critical situation, he needed to take advantage of the environment. Shunye recalled that no matter whether it was an elf village or a battlefield, he was always on foreign territory and accepted help from other characters. The main character understood that this was the key to the solution, but he thought that it would not be easy for him to repeat this, because each time he seemed to walk on a razor's edge. Still, the guy decided to give up this hidden technique because he was afraid that if he continued to wander through the worlds, he would definitely run into another danger. The protagonist was distracted from these thoughts by a sudden sound signal. Someone wanted to contact the guy. The voice from the intercom informed Shenya that a girl had come to see him, who called herself a relative of Luo Feichuan. Her identity was confirmed by the company. The main character was very surprised to hear this and thought that he could not ignore the sudden guest because she was a relative of the man who saved him with his own valuable life. Soon the main character arrived on the 50th floor where the meeting was to take place, and turning to an unfamiliar girl, asked if she was looking for him. To this, the girl asked if the guy was that Shen Ye. The protagonist briefly confirmed this. At that very moment, the boy felt the same strange feeling as when he met the head of the elven village. The great swordswoman named Chao Minui said that she was the sister of the murdered police captain and came here to find out something. Shen Ye was shocked to see the girl's assessment and thought that he had never seen anything like this from either humans or elves. Then the main character assumed that it was this girl that Qian was talking about, Zhu Shan, during that phone conversation. Meanwhile, Chao Menyu continued to say that she found the people who were involved in the breakdown of her brother's weapon. Unfortunately, they turned out to be his colleagues. The next moment, the girl coldly declared that she had already killed these people. Shen Ye was shocked by what he heard, which made him dumbfounded for a while and even afraid to move. Finally, he timidly asked how the girl managed to do this, because according to Qian, it was very difficult for Jushan to deal with them. Qiao, without going into details, Menu replied that she was able to do it. Then the girl began to say with regret that she always wanted her brother, who was a person with disabilities, to find a good job, become a successor to the family line, and be safe. The girl continued to say that at first everything went according to her plan, but in the end, Luo Feichuan was vilely killed, tied up, and hidden in a closet. Shen Ye silently listened to all this. Suddenly the girl asked why the main character was silent and insisted that she had the right to avenge her brother's death. The worried guy immediately began to justify himself by saying that he was thinking. Shen Ye also asked if the girl would definitely not be arrested for what she did. Chao Menui. I understood that the main characters, although they were from an aristocratic family, never lived by these laws, so I said that she spoke out on behalf of her family to achieve justice. The girl continued to talk about how she asked questions to the killer, but he didn't even know that he had killed a member of the Lo family, so her investigation reached a dead end. Actually, Qiao Mengyu came here to ask Shen Ye who wanted to kill him and if he had any leads. The girl asked him to tell her the names and promised to sort everything out. The main character honestly answered that he had no clues, after which he asked the girl why she needed this, since she had already avenged her brother Qiao. Menu briefly replied that this was not enough. Suddenly, the girl pulled out her sword, promising that she would find the customer who wanted the death of the main character, because he was also guilty of her brother's death, just like the killer. After that, the girl abruptly swung her weapon and sent a stream of air cutting into the sky. Shen Ye was shocked by the power he saw, which made him unable to move for some time. The main character, looking at the sky and seeing how the clouds parted from the swing of the sword, could not believe in the reality of what was happening. Meanwhile, the girl hoped that her brother would find peace. The guy was still shocked and couldn't believe that Qiao did all this. Menu didn't even see how the girl took out her sword. Then the girl asked again if the main character had seen anything special or unusual. She asked the guy not to give up the investigation and promised to help him solve any problem. Shen Ye replied regretfully that he had no idea at all, since even his family did not maintain contact with the Shen family, so they had no conflicts with other clans. Suddenly the boy remembered that when he was in the hospital, he heard strange sounds. He assumed that someone was eavesdropping on him. Qiao Mengyu latched onto these words. The girl decided that she needed to find out more details about this, so she decided to contact someone. After that, she thanked the main character for his help and began to leave. Qian appeared behind the guy. Rushan, who was amazed by Qiao's terrifying blade, Mengyu said that at first he was afraid that the girl came here to take revenge on Shen Ye for the death of her brother, but everything went well. The man then said that Qiao Mengyu was the most outstanding heir of the Luo family, and even among the great clans, she could be called an outstanding figure, even though she had only just entered middle school this year. The director also said that if the main character had grown up in the Shen family since childhood, he would not have been much weaker than the girl. Shen Ye did not attach any importance to this. As soon as the main character returned to his room, he began to worry greatly about the fact that people from the aristocracy wanted to kill him, because today he was convinced of how strong people from noble families were. The guy decided that he needed to learn some attacking moves quickly, so he asked Mikteti Kahiwa did he have nightmare crystals that would help him become stronger. Shen Ye turned to Mikteti Kahiwe, asked if he had any crystals that enhanced skills. The skeleton replied that he only had those crystals that enhanced the skills of the undead, and they certainly wouldn't suit the guy. Shen Ye was not at all happy to hear this and began to assume that he would only be able to learn attacking techniques after enrolling. In addition, the guy soon had to take exams. Suddenly, the main character remembered that he had not yet looked at the backpack that Loman gave him. The guy quickly began to unpack his things, but apart from dry rations and a first aid kit, he hadn't found anything special yet. Unexpectedly, the main character took out a large nightmare crystal from his backpack and was very happy about this find. Shen Ye immediately used the crystal, hoping that he would come across some good skill. The system told the guy that if he saw a tent with 3 daggers, he would be able to complete the quest. The main character was very upset because he did not understand what it meant. At the same time, Mikteti Kahiwa laughed and assumed that Lo Meng mistook the guy for a member of the Shadow Hand. After that, the guy began to think about the fact that he had already received notes today, so he could try to go to another world and look for something new. Then the main character turned to the skeleton and said that the land of the undead behind the secret passage had already been captured by soldiers of the human army, so he needed human equipment. A moment later, Mktedi Kahiva provided everything necessary and said that the guy would pretend to be a soldier guarding the border who managed to survive the attack of the undead. Shunya asked what kind of crystal it was and learned that it was a symbol of faith that would be useful to him when meeting people. Entering the gate, the guy asked why the skeleton had been taking such good care of him lately. Mktedi Kahiwa replied that it was his gratitude for the main character saving him from death. In addition, the skeleton wanted to send the guy to the world of nightmares so that he would reach a certain position and be able to buy the materials that were needed to cure him. Soon, Shenya was already in another world where it was now deep night. The main character saw that on the battlefield, in addition to the mutilated corpses of people and the undead, there were still soldiers left. One of the men loudly called his comrade and said that there was a wounded man who needed help. Shunya watched without drawing attention to himself as the soldiers carried their comrade to the main camp to provide him with the necessary medical attention. Since there were still soldiers on the battlefield, the main character believed that he could not act rashly, because if he was exposed before he found out everything, it would be bad. The guy also couldn't help but notice that there were a lot of corpses around that could be used to find out the necessary information. Without wasting any time, Shen Ye activated his Dark Whisper skill to revive the undead giant and ask him a few questions. The guy showed his mask and asked if his interlocutor knew anything about this armor. Unfortunately, the answer was not comforting. Then the guy quickly ran to the other phone to ask the same question. The protagonist used his skill and asked the people in undead who had fallen on the battlefield if they knew what kind of armor it was, but no one could answer this question. All this took some time. Shen Ye completely lost hope of finding out the necessary information and thought that all this was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Suddenly, the main character noticed a corpse lying nearby. The guy saw the werewolf and thought that he could help him because his sense of smell must have been very keen. Shen Ye revived the werewolf and, showing the mask again, asked if he had seen such armor or perhaps smelled a similar smell. The werewolf replied that this mask belonged to a man who now had only one hand left. Shen Ye thanked the monster for his help and allowed him to return to the other world. Then the main character approached the lonely hand that was lying on the battlefield and began to think about whether his skill would work on it. Still, he used Whisper of Darkness. At that very moment, the severed hand began to tremble and try to move. The guy asked if she heard him. Suddenly, the hand showed that very unusual gesture that indicated that the main character could ask his question. Shen Ye was very happy because he already knew that this was the signature sign of the shadow hand, and therefore asked the hand to help him find the information he needed. Immediately after this, the hand clearly pointed the main character in the direction where he should go in order to find out everything he needed. Surprisingly, the hand pointed to a leather boot that lay alone on the battlefield. It was still unclear how this could help the guy. Hearing the request for help, the severed hand immediately clearly pointed out to the main character the direction he should go in order to find out everything he needed. Surprisingly, the hand pointed to a leather boot that lay alone on the battlefield. It was still unclear how this could help the guy. Without wasting any time, Shen Ye began to look at the shoes, even though they stank badly. He soon realized that there was something inside. There were several things inside. At that moment, the system informed the guy that he had found a sufficient number of special items, due to which the auxiliary ability knowledge was unlocked. The first item turned out to be the Dark Shadow emblem, which had a pattern of secret runes engraved on it and could be used to activate a special weapon. Upon learning of this, Shen Ye immediately had one thought that he decided to immediately check, and to do this, he needed to look into his equipment. The protagonist quickly took out his nightlight blade and tried to activate the special weapon using the emblem he found. Surprisingly, it worked perfectly. The system reported that the item level had increased and that the nightlight blade had turned into the Night Veil sword. The main character did not expect this at all, so he was very happy with such an unexpected gift of fate. The guy also did not forget about the note that he found, along with the emblem in the same AUG. It turned out that this was a task from the organization Hand of Shadow, which called on everyone to go to the battlefield to collect information about the undead that could be exchanged for a generous reward. Now Shen Ye realized that Luo Meng was also a member of the Shadow Hand, and so when he saw his armor, he decided to help and gave him a crystal that indicated the location of the organization. Asked him about everything, but he knew nothing. The guy was not upset and tried to find out the necessary information from other undead, but no one knew anything because the soldiers could only fight. Shenye was not at all happy about what he heard and realized that this task would not be so easy to complete. McTeddy turned to the main character Kahiwa, who was still in the spatial ring, said that he could give the guy all the information he needed. The guy was very happy because he really did have his own undead, but he asked if the skeleton was ready to give him this information because it was about his clan. McTeddy Kahiva explained that even though the undead were members of his clan, he had long held a grudge against them. Shenya realized that his friend was not living very well among the undead. Meanwhile, McTeddy Kahiva asked what kind of information the guy wanted to receive, sensational or ordinary. The protagonist asked to tell something ordinary so as not to arouse suspicion. Then the skeleton said that the undead used new components to improve the guns, which could increase their power by 20%. Hearing this, the guy asked McTeddy if this information was too valuable. Kahiva replied that in fact the higher echelons were already aware of this, they just hadn't told others yet. Shenya was very pleased with this, because he could get a reward without doing much. In the distance, the guy saw a military camp and assumed that it was there that the hand of the shadow that gave the assignment was located. McTeddy Kahiwa unexpectedly advised the protagonist to pretend to be wounded so that the soldiers themselves would carry him to the military camp. Shenya thought this was a good idea, but asked how things were with medicine on the battlefield. The skeleton said that the effect of human medicine was best if a person had money, because with money it was even possible to restore the skull. Then the guy asked what kind of medicine the undead McTeddy had Kahiva. He replied that usually those who were almost dead were forced to commit suicide because treating them was too much of a hassle. The skeleton explained that they needed special spells and sacrifices from other people to cure the undead. Usually, only high-ranking undead use this method. Having heard all this, the main character agreed that people really treated the wounded better, but unfortunately he did not have money. The skeleton suddenly said that he had money. Hearing this, the guy had an idea, so he approached the lifeless body of the undead giant. Shenya wasted no time increasing his strength stats and began to lift the huge McTeddy hammer. Kahiva didn't understand why the guy was doing this. Without explaining anything, the main character said that if he couldn't make a sound by that time, then McTeddy would have to do it. Kahiva. The next moment, Shenya brought down a huge hammer on himself, which crushed him to the ground with a loud bang. As a result, the guy was seriously injured and began to tremble in pain but still remained conscious. McTeddy Kahiwa asked why the main character did this, to which the guy replied that it was his game. After that, Shenya began to pound the iron shield with a stone and loudly call for help. This was immediately heard by the soldiers who were nearby. They simply could not ignore the call for help. The soldiers were very alarmed to learn that there was another survivor on the battlefield and immediately went to help their comrade. After some time, the wounded protagonist was already taken to a military camp. The girl in the nun's robe was diligently reciting mysterious spells that were supposed to improve Shenye's condition. A bright aura enveloped the main character and helped his body recover faster. Soon the healer's work was done, thanks to which the main character felt much better. The girl informed her master that she had already completed her healing, so the guy would soon feel better. The elderly man promised that the healer would be rewarded for this work. Just at that moment, Shenye woke up and started asking where he was. The man from the red square replied that the guy was safe and was now in the human camp. He then said that he was Prince Norton and asked if the main character was one of the subordinates of Lord Lane, since there was a dog emblem on his shield. Shenye said that Lane was captured by the undead, so he asked the prince to come to his aid as soon as possible. He also held out a crystal that contained a message asking for help. The elderly man quickly took the crystal in his hands and, concentrating, began to read a mysterious spell in an unknown language. At that very moment, everyone heard a voice that promised whoever could bring troops to save his territory would be paid 300 gold coins and rewarded with a plot of land. The elderly man, hearing this voice, confirmed that it really belonged to the Lord of Lane and that everything was fine with the crystal. Prince Norton turned to the protagonist with regret and informed him that Lane had already been completely defeated, and it was quite possible that only the guy had survived. In order to maintain his image, Shenye, upon hearing this, began to cry, not believing that Lane had actually been defeated. The girl was very worried about all her relatives and friends who probably did not manage to escape. Prince Norton was surprised that this child had gone through so many difficulties on his way, so he intended to organize a trip for the boy to the rear of the empire so that he could find a safe place to live. Shen Ye, hearing this, was not at all happy that he was going to be sent out of the military camp because he needed to find the Shadow Hand tent to complete the quest and exchange skills. That is why the main character unexpectedly expressed a desire to stay in the military camp. Prince Norton was very surprised and asked why the guy wanted this. Shen Ye, through tears, resolutely replied that he wanted to take revenge on the undead and fight for those he had lost. There was an immediate silence in the tent. Everyone present was amazed by the determination of this child. Prince Norton believed that it was precisely because of the boy's courage that the Lord of Lane chose him. Then the man asked if the main character had any abilities. Shen Ye immediately declared that he ran fast and in the entire area, none of his peers could compare to him. At the same time, the guy quickly increased his agility to the maximum. Soon after, the protagonist went out into the street to demonstrate to the prince and his subordinates that his words were true. Suddenly, for everyone, the guy suddenly jumped up and ran forward at great speed, leaving behind clouds of dust. The main character easily ran around the entire military camp and couldn't even control his speed on the turns. The soldiers could only watch in amazement at the inhuman speed this child possessed. After that, Shen Ye quickly returned to the prince to find out what his verdict was after what he saw. The guy, breathing heavily and coming to her senses, asked the man if he could stay in the military camp. The subordinates advised their master to leave the guy here because they believed that he could help them. Prince Norton nevertheless agreed because the main character's abilities were very useful. Suddenly, the elf who had been silent all this time turned to Shen Ye and took his hand and asked where he got this bracelet from. Prince Norton, seeing this thing, immediately realized that it belonged to the elves, which made him very surprised. The main character honestly answered that this bracelet was a gift from an elf named Lanny. Hearing this, the elf touched the bracelet and began to read a mysterious spell in an incomprehensible language, from which an aura appeared around the yak rock. The guy could only humbly watch what was happening. Lanny appeared before our heroes. The Grand Master of the royal court turned to the girl and asked how her bracelet could end up on a human boy. Shen Ye was glad to see Lenny and greeted her. The girl was also glad and asked when he would visit her village. The Grand Master repeated her question again, and then the girl told about everything that had recently happened in her village and how the guy was involved in it. Having heard this whole story, the woman let go of the main character's hand, after which the connection with Lenny was broken. Then she turned to the prince and said that this child had experienced many hardships, but remained alive. She believed that they could make friends with the elven clan, and for this it was necessary to send the boy to study in the Empire. Prince Norton thought that this was a good idea, since elves rarely valued people so highly. So he ordered that the main character be given an identification card, and that a good place for him to rest be found. Then he turned to the guy and asked what his name was. Shen Ye was taken aback by this question because he did not know the local customs and peculiarities of names. That is why the main character suddenly grabbed his head and complained of severe pain so that everyone would think that he had lost his memory. The elderly man immediately assumed that the strong blow had caused a concussion and partial memory loss. The guy mentally thanked the old man for these words. After this, Prince Norton kindly took the protagonist by the shoulder and said that he simply needed to go and rest. Finally, the man said that they would meet the main character again, calling him a guy who had survived adversity. At that moment, the system informed Shen Ye that his reputation would be raised, and he was now called a boy who had survived adversity. The main character was not at all happy with this nickname and wondered if it could somehow be removed. The system reported that there were two ways to cancel the entry. You could either become a hermit and wait until people forgot about you, or do things that completely contradicted the meaning of the nickname. Shen Ye really wanted to get rid of this nickname, so he thought that the first option would suit him better, because he would soon leave this world and return home. Then the main character asked the skeleton why all the phrases said by the prince had such a strong impact on his reputation, as Miktedi Kahiwa explained that this was because the prince was the eldest son of the imperial family and was heir to the throne. Meanwhile, the old man said that this unexpectedly appeared child was very interesting. The Grand Master immediately asked if the old man really saw something in him. The old man said that the main character really believed in the hand of shadow. This surprised him because people were not always so religious at a young age. The elf realized that her colleagues spoke like that because of the short blade. Prince Norton also saw the main character with this blade and knew well that only high-ranking people had this thing. The man did not expect at all that while walking around he would stumble upon such a talented person. After some time, Shen Ye found the same tent in the military camp that had a sign with 3 swords on it. The guy went inside and began to look around, believing that this was where the camp of the Hands of Shadow organization was located. Soon the main character saw a man who was processing the skin of a wild animal and did not react at all to his greeting. Then Shen Ye made that same hand gesture and wished for the stranger to have his shadow come with him. The man immediately responded to the greeting with the same gesture, and calling the guest his brother, asked what news he had. Shen Ye wasted no time taking out the crystal, and said that he got it from the undead. The man thought that it was a good thing and asked what the guy wanted in return. The main character chose to look at the entire assortment. The man immediately began to assure that he had a lot of good things and guaranteed that the guy would be delighted. The first thing the man showed was a combat dagger that was coated with a special poison. This weapon was most suitable for assassins on the battlefield. Shen Ye was overcome weapons, however, not very impressed. He asked if the man had anything else. Then the man suggested looking at the next lot. Suddenly the man began to blow loudly. It was like a whistle calling someone. Shen Ye was taken aback and watched intently to see what would happen next. Soon a horse appeared near the entrance to the tent and quickly ran up as soon as it heard the sound of the whistle. At some point, something strange began to happen to the animal. It seemed that she died. As soon as the horse fell to the ground, the man calmly explained that she was pretending to be dead when someone looked into her eyes. Shen Ye saw all this and asked if the horse and dagger came in one set. The man confirmed this, but the boy wanted to look at something else. The man immediately showed off glasses that, according to him, penetrated light. He explained that with these glasses, the protagonist could see money and other valuables on a person's body even through clothes. Shen Ye was truly amazed. However, the guy was most interested in the nightmare crystals because he wanted to learn a new skill. The man replied that due to military action, supplies were limited, so he only had 2 crystals. The first of them gave the opportunity to master the technique of bleeding, which allowed the enemy to bleed. It could be used with various types of weapons, but this crystal gave only basic knowledge of the technique. The second crystal was called Storm and had a counterattack technique that could push back enemies and their weapons. The man asked which crystal Shen Ye chose. The main character wanted to get both of these crystals, but suddenly a mysterious voice addressed him, which had already helped the guy before and now advised him to choose the Storm crystal. Shen Ye was very surprised when he heard the voice of that mysterious something that had previously pointed out to him and given him the short sword, Light of the Foot. Now this voice advised the guy to choose the crystal Storm. Ignoring the merchant, the guy asked why he had to make that particular choice. The voice explained that it was a technique from another world. Then the protagonist had to figure out how to obtain the undead race's shadow technique and the beast lord race's thunderclap technique in order to combine them with the moon deer and storm. According to the mysterious voice, all this was necessary for the guy to reveal the true secret. Intrigued, Shen Ye still trusted the voice and chose the storm crystal. Without wasting any time, the protagonist used this crystal to learn a counterattack technique that could push back enemies and their weapons. At that moment, new knowledge filled Shen Ye's consciousness, accompanied by beautiful effects. The merchant then said that the storm was just a basic technique, while the reward value for the information the guy provided was higher, so he could offer something else. Shen Ye didn't need anything else from the offered goods, so the man, in order to compensate for the difference in price, gave the main character a bag with a piece of gold inside. The merchant's tent. The boy turned to Mkteti Kahiwe, asked if he could get him the skill of the undead race. The skeleton reminded that in order to use the skills of this race, there had to be fire in the soul. He was very surprised when Shen Ye asked him for a shadow skill because it required a lot of agility and spiritual power, but was essentially useless. The skill only released a ray of shadow to enchant the enemy. Despite this, the main character still wanted to get this skill and was ready to redistribute the characteristics and invest 3 points of spiritual strength and 4 points of dexterity into it. Before starting to test his skill, the protagonist looked around carefully to make sure that no one would see him using the skills of the undead race. As soon as Shen Ye confirmed that there was absolutely no one around, he used the shadow technique. At that very moment, an ominous shadow appeared out of nowhere and quickly moved forward. Having flown some distance, this shadow suddenly began to slow down and literally dissolve in the air. This is where the effect of the technique ended. Shen Ye was not at all impressed by what he saw and thought that this skill only looked scary but had no other advantages. Mkteti Kahiva thought that the guard simply had no taste for such things. Then the guy thought about the fact that he had already mastered the deer under the moon, storm, and shadow technique. Now he only had to acquire the thunderclap skill in order to see what would happen when all this was combined. Suddenly, one of the knights, who had been looking for him here for a long time, approached the main character. He congratulated Shenye and said that due to his brave deeds, the king personally decided to reward him with a badge of bravery and a letter of recommendation. The guy didn't understand why he needed all this, but he still thanked him for the recognition. Then the knight asked the main character to take this letter and go to the military academy of the empire to undergo training. In his mind, the main character expressed gratitude to the king for his kindness and was glad that he now had enough money to live in this world. Shenye also intended to take the gold he received from the merchant home to help his family. This time, the journey to another world ended very successfully for the guy. After some time, the main character returned to the company's headquarters and immediately got to work. The guy's voice assistant reported that his gold had been exchanged for 65,444 yuan. This money, as Shenye requested, had already been transferred to the account he had specified. The main character thanked the assistant for the quick work and at that very moment heard his phone ring. It was the guy's dismayed mother calling, asking why he had given her so much money and where it had come from. Shenye explained that it was a subsidy he had received after joining the company. After a short conversation, the guy noticed that during the time he spent in the world of nightmares, he received many messages. Many of them concerned his successful signing of a contract with the company. One of these messages came from Zhao Ibn, who admitted her guilt and asked the guy for forgiveness. She also suggested that he go to the movies that evening. Shenye was not at all delighted by these words, but he was noticeably embarrassed. He admitted that this girl was beautiful, but he did not want to continue communicating with her at all. In the end, the protagonist rejected Zhao via text message. Ibn asked her to be a realist because she was still far from him. Immediately after this, the guy received a message from Hao Yu, who also congratulated him on signing the contract and suggested celebrating it tonight. Shenye would have really liked to eat some roasted meat with his friend, but he knew that he was currently being targeted by assassins, so suddenly leaving the company and participating in the events was dangerous for him. Although the original owner of the body was dead, the friendship between him and Chen Haoyu was still not torn apart. The protagonist had never felt such a feeling of sincere and pure friendship before, so he did not want to lose his friend. Coming soon from Chen Haoyue received another message in which he asked permission to look at the company from the inside, because this was his main dream. Shen Ye thought that this was a great idea. It was very safe here, and he could not only satisfy the guy's curiosity, but also spend time with him, so he immediately made an appointment to meet in the lobby. Soon, Shenye went down to the lobby of the company headquarters to meet his friend Chen. Hao Yu promised that he would be here in 10 minutes. Suddenly, the main character stopped abruptly and began to become noticeably nervous when he saw what was happening ahead. Right in the middle of the hall stood a large group of people. They all looked very suspicious and literally exuded an ominous aura around themselves. Shenye immediately noticed that their energy was different from ordinary people, and soon realized that they were the company employees with the qualifications that Qian had spoken about recently, Zhushan. Suddenly, one of the men felt the main character's gaze on him and therefore looked back at him sharply. Approaching the guy, the man asked if he was the new guy. Shen Ye, trying to remain calm, confirmed this and then apologized for disturbing him with his gaze. To his surprise, the man suddenly smiled good-naturedly and said that everything was fine. Then he said that when he was a newbie, he also looked at his senior colleagues in the same way. Hearing this, the main character noticeably calmed down and assumed that the man at that moment wanted to become like his elders. But this was not at all the case. Remembering those times, the creepy man suddenly replied that when he looked at them, he felt a sense of hatred and a desire to tear everyone to pieces. Shen Ye didn't expect such an answer at all, so now he was afraid to comment on these words in any way. But the power of this professional amazed him. Suddenly, the man was distracted from his conversation with the main character because he noticed a girl who was passing by. The man greeted Vina and asked if she was working today. He really wanted her to have dinner with him today. The next moment, Vina pointed her gun at the man and bluntly stated that if he continued to pursue her, she would rip his skin off like she had that demon a few days ago. The man accepted this refusal and left. After that, the girl turned to Shen Ye and said that a certain Chen wanted to meet with him. Hao Yu Guy explained that it was his classmate, so he should be let in. Hearing this, Vina asked the protagonist to stay here while she brought his guest here. Shen Ye immediately said that the girl should not worry because he himself could meet his friend. To this, Vina replied that even here it could be dangerous now. Therefore, Qianzhushan gave them all instructions to guard the main character. Shen Ye had no choice but to accept these conditions and humbly wait for his friend away from the front door. Soon, Chen Haoyu was already inside the company's office and was amazed at how luxurious it was here. He literally didn't have enough eyes to see everything here. The guy also said that Shen Ye was very cool and he couldn't even imagine the excitement he caused at school with this contract signing. The protagonist did not want to talk about it and suggested his friend to go to Chen's canteen. Haoyu was not yet golden, so he expressed a great desire to see where exactly the guy lived. After a short wait, the elevator doors opened. Our heroes saw that it was almost filled with other company employees. However, the friends still went inside. Shen Ye asked Chen to Haoyu, who never ceased to be surprised by everything, chose the 105th floor on the control panel. At this moment, the main character received a message from Chao Menyu, who reported that when the boy was subjected to an anomalous attack in the hospital, the nurse saw everything that happened but then disappeared. Shen Ye must have watched. The video showed a man whom Chao Menyu suspected that it was he who got rid of the unnecessary witness. The video clearly showed a young guy walking quickly down the corridor and looking around carefully as if he was looking for someone. His face was hard to see, as if he was deliberately walking in such a way that the camera would not capture him. At the same time, the guy was carrying an object in his hand that looked like a short knife. While Shen Ye was watching this video, Chen Haoyu continued to send him messages, informing him that she had checked the people around the protagonist again. Suddenly, Shen Ye began to feel a strong sense of excitement, as if he had seen something he had not expected to see at all. It turned out that the guy who was caught on video was Chen Haoyu. According to Chao Menyu, this man behaved very strangely at school yesterday morning and seemed to be looking for something. Shen Ye was surprised that his friend was looking for him yesterday morning. He remembered that at that time, he was in the nightmare world, so Chen Haoyu couldn't find him even after going around the entire school building. When the elevator reached the 18th floor, everyone except two friends got out of the elevator, so Chen Haoyu could feel the protagonist's gaze on him. Chen Haoyu immediately turned to the guy and asked what was the matter. At this time, Chao Mengyu continued to write messages and asked Shen Ye to be careful when meeting this person. Soon our heroes arrived at the 105th floor of Chen Haoyu said with admiration that he had never risen to such a height. He envied his friend in a good-natured way. The guy also asked to quickly show where the main character's apartment was. He really wanted to look at it. Shen Ye answered without enthusiasm that it was right opposite the elevator. Chen Haoyu immediately understood what apartment they were talking about. It could be said that they had already arrived. Suddenly, Chen Haoyu, without leaving his character, attacked the main character with lightning speed. Shen Ye unfortunately didn't have time to dodge and therefore suffered greatly from the unexpected blow to the head. It turned out that Chen Haoyu used his skills to thrust a pen into the protagonist's head, causing blood to immediately spray out in all directions. A moment later, the guy began to study the bright light and his body gradually dissolved into the air. Chen Haoyu, he realized that it was an illusion, but he did not expect at all that his friend possessed such powerful techniques. While the villain was confused by what had happened, Shen Ye took advantage of this moment and attacked him from behind. It turned out that the main character had distributed his characteristic points in advance, and now 3 types of abilities were available to him at once. Using the skill Deer Under the Moon as a basis, he discovered a new technique called Heaven Shaking. It pushed the enemy away, allowed him to create an illusion, and increased his speed by 30%. Shen Ye then turned to the attacker and said that he was not Chen Haoyu. Now he was most interested in where his friend was. The scoundrel realized that he had been exposed, so no longer adhering to his image, he began to laugh loudly and talk about how Chen Haoyu was already dead. Suddenly, the man armed with pens again rushed at the main character, threatening him that he would soon join his friend in the next world. Shen Ye, of course, had no intention of giving up so easily, so he had already prepared himself to strike. The boy once again used the Heaven Shaking technique, which allowed him to attack his enemy very quickly. Despite the high speed, this technique was quite weak, so the villain laughed at it and thought that he could handle the main character with just one hand. Shen Ye's leg began to emit much more energy than before, which momentarily confused the assassin. The next moment, the main character, thanks to the new technique, managed to throw his opponent far back. The villain did not expect this at all. After that, the guy quickly took out a gun, while being surprised that by combining low-level skills, he managed to create a new powerful ability. Without wasting any time, Shen Ye started shooting at the villain, but he managed to dodge absolutely all the bullets fired. As soon as the guy ran out of bullets, the woman began to fearlessly approach him, simultaneously saying that his skill with a pistol left much to be desired. At that very moment, the entire company headquarters went into alarm. The voice assistant reported that a gun had been found on the 105th floor, so all professional fighters had to immediately go to the scene and check everything. Just a few minutes later, the building was already surrounded by planes. After all this, it became clear that Shen Ye had not been shooting to hit his opponent. Suddenly, 4 shots were heard in the corridor. The fired bullets hit the target and literally tore off the scoundrel's arms and legs. It turned out that these shots were fired by Wen. The girl was indignant that the scoundrel managed to trick her. At the same time, Shen Ye did not hide his surprise at how quickly help arrived. Without wasting time, Wena roughly grabbed the scoundrel and began to ask who sent him to kill Shen Ye. In order to quickly find out the answers, she threatened to rip the man's skin off if he did not speak. In response to this, the man only laughed, and with the last of his strength said that the girl would not find out anything from him. After that, the villain began to roll his eyes and release white foam from his mouth. Vina realized that the man had swallowed the poison hidden in his mouth. She regretted that she had not hit him at the right moment. Then the girl began to say that she had never seen anyone with such high-quality disguise. Now all she had to do was report everything and look for other evidence. Vina looked at the lifeless body of the killer and said that she had never seen anyone with such a high-quality disguise. Now all she had to do was report everything and look for other evidence. Soon, Qian Zhushan was informed that the technical department had deciphered everything, and it turned out that the attacker was a killer with excellent skills. But he had nothing that could confirm his identity. There was also no information about this scoundrel in the database, so Vina was already powerless here. The man found this not surprising at all, since this killer had excellent skills in working with leather, and even the company's security system was unable to discover his true identity. Qian Zhushan felt that there was no more use for this corpse, so he suggested returning, but Shen Ye suddenly expressed a desire to stay here a little longer. The man was not against this because he believed that this child felt death very well and could perhaps feel something. Soon the boy was left in the morgue all alone. Without wasting any time, the protagonist used the dark whisper skill and ordered the dead man to get up and answer his question. The killer, who returned from the other world, was first of all very surprised that the guy could communicate with the dead. However, he laughingly declared that he would not tell the main character anything, so all his efforts were useless. Mikteti Kahiwa had never seen such a reaction from a corpse to the dark whisper technique before. He didn't know what would happen if the dead man didn't speak, but he assumed that this show would be very interesting. A moment later, the killer found himself in a sinister, otherworldly world. He was nailed to the wall, which left the villain perplexed. Of the dead began to emerge from the wall, and their hands firmly grabbed the man. At the same time, small bright sparks appeared around. The next moment, a scorching flame enveloped the villain, and the dead began to tear his flesh with their bare hands. All this frightened the man very much and brought him terrible pain. Shen Ye humbly watched as the fire consumed the killer. He didn't expect anything like this, but he didn't interfere with this process for now. Very soon the fire died down significantly, and it became clear that only charred bones remained of the killer's body. Mysterious fire lit up in the villain's eyes and his bones began to grow muscles. The man very quickly regained consciousness. The killer's body was completely restored, but the tormenting spirits continued to hold him tightly, because this was far from the end. As soon as the flame flared up again, Mikteti Kahiva began to explain that anyone who refused to speak with the dark whisper was doomed to eternal torment. All 360 types of torture will be applied in the same way after another, and each torture will last 100 million years. And why will it be replaced by another torture until the dead man speaks? Hearing this, the scoundrel began to beg to stop all this and promised that he would tell everything. At that very moment, all the torment stopped, and the killer's body was back in the morgue. Mikteti Kahiva, he assumed that just a few seconds of hellish torment could convince the man and make him cooperate. At the same time, Shen Ye took out his phone. The main character dialed the right number and called someone. While the phone was ringing, the guy demanded that the scoundrel tell him everything he knew from beginning to end. A few minutes before, events very important for this story took place on the roof of the girls' dormitory. Mr. Han asked how Zhao's affairs were proposed. Yibin assured that everything was done according to the instructions, but nothing worked out with Shen Ye because he was recruited by the martial arts company. Having received this message, the mysterious man asked the girl to come to the Guilin Hotel today at 7 o'clock in the evening without delay. Zhao Yibin didn't seem very happy about this. Suddenly, someone called the girl and told her the good news that she had received a quota to enter the most famous high school. This raised Zhao's spirits. Ibn. After that, the girl, with tears in her eyes, thanked Mr. Han in these messages and promised that she would arrive without delay. Suddenly, behind Zhao Yibin appeared out of nowhere. Chao Menu briefly ordered him to give her the phone. For some reason, she was interested in who the girl had just spoken to. Zhao Yibin immediately began to indignantly ask who the stranger was and why she had to give her anything at all. Chao Menu had no intention of explaining anything to the girl, but she needed to get her to cooperate as quickly as possible, so she dared to take extreme measures. The next moment, the girl swung her sword with all her might toward Zhao's head. However, Yibin stopped at the very last moment. All this really scared the schoolgirl. Next, Chao Menu said in a serious voice that she knew that the girl was most proud not of her achievements, but of her face. So she should give up the phone so as not to get hurt. Zhao Yibin finally came to terms with her situation and fulfilled the girl's demand, threatening to contact the police. At that moment, someone called Chao's phone, Menui. It turned out that it was Shenye who called. He told the girl that he had caught and interrogated the killer, who eventually confessed to everything. Scared Zhao Yibin, having heard the name of the main character in the conversation, assumed that this girl was sent to her by Shenye to take revenge on her. Meanwhile, the guy continued to interrogate the killer so that Chao could hear it. Meng Yu Man revealed that the members of the Assassins Association had recently received a joint mission to assassinate Shenye. The main goal was to make sure that the guy would end up dying as if from an accident. A real show was staged in the hospital, but the main character still survived and acquired witnesses. All this led to the fact that the killers now needed not only to kill the guy, but also to collect all the evidence. At that moment, a young policeman found them, so he had to be eliminated. Shen Ye was very depressed by all this and asked why the scoundrels hid Captain Luo's corpse like that and where they put Chen's corpse. How you? Chao Menu, who was still in touch, reported that she had found the boy's body in the school sewers. This made the main character very angry. Barely containing his anger, Shen Ye turned to the killer again and demanded that he tell them who their customer was. Barely containing his anger, Shen Ye turned to the killer again and demanded that he tell them who their customer was. The man did not want to repeat the torture, so he honestly answered that only the person responsible for this mission knew all the information about the customer. Then the guy asked where the person in charge was now. It turned out that he was called the Skinner, and he was a very famous killer in the criminal world. According to the scoundrel, this man went to the maple forest near the western suburbs because the girl he was going to kill was there as a nurse. Shinya then asked who this man was and what his weakness was. The assassin insisted that the strength of the Skinner was incomprehensible, so he could not even think of what weaknesses he might have. The scoundrel also said that this man's status in the world of killers did not allow him to personally kill the main character, since he was only a newbie here. He believed that controlling the progress of the plan for this murder was already a great honor for the customer. Shenya couldn't believe that the Skinner was completely unremarkable and had no special features, so he once again insisted that the murderer tell everything he knew. The scoundrel confirmed that this man did indeed have one unique habit. It was Shen Ye and Chao's cannibalism. Menu heard this and noticeably tensed up. Suddenly, the girl said that she would go to meet this Skinner right now. The main character tried to stop her, but Chao Menu was already hung up. Suddenly, the killer started laughing loudly and saying that although he didn't know who that girl was, if she was looking for the Skinner, then she would have a hard time because he loved to eat young girls. At that very moment, the main character, in order to silence the villain, hit him in the face with all his might, causing several of his teeth to fly out of his mouth. Moreover, this blow was so strong that it knocked the killer off the table. Shen Ye demanded that the scoundrel not answer questions that were not asked of him, after which he dispelled his technique. Some time passed. Despite the late hour, the lights were still on in the five-star Maple Forest Hotel, which was located outside the city. This time and place was perfect for a fine dining experience that was meant for just one person. Despite the fact that there was also a girl sitting at the table, the food on the table was intended only for her companion. The man with excellent manners praised the taste of the food spreading throughout his mouth, while suggesting that the time spent in solitude added a little tension to the girl. He apologized for this and then took a few sips of a red drink that looked like wine. The man insisted that the Bloody Mary cocktail went perfectly with meat dishes thanks to its impeccable balance of sweetness and acidity. It soon became clear that the villain had been eating human flesh right in front of his victim all this time. He assured that he had not tried such a high-quality delicacy for a long time. In gratitude for this, the scoundrel intended to thoroughly enjoy every piece. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a sound signal, which notified that a new message had arrived on the phone. The first thing the man did was ask his victim for forgiveness, saying that there were always impolite servants who interrupted his dinner. It turned out that this message was sent to him by that same Mr. Khan. The man asked if the Skinner could personally take on the murder of Shen Ye, who had already managed to eliminate 3 assassins sent by him. The scoundrel replied that, of course he could take on this job, but he was interested in what he would receive as payment for his services. Mr. Khan promised to pay him with a girl. At first, the man insisted that his beauty standards were very high, but once he saw the photos Mr. Han sent of Zhao Yibin immediately fell silent. Skinner was struck by the beauty of this girl, and so for some time he just silently looked at these photographs with his mouth open in admiration. Suddenly the man's entire body began to tremble with overwhelming feelings. He called Zhao Yibin is a beautiful and innocent lamb. Looking at this girl, he felt the intoxicating aroma of her body, and therefore thanked Mr. Han for arranging a meeting for them at 8 o'clock this evening. The scoundrel promised that for this he would kill Shen Ye. The man soon realized that there was not much time left before this meeting, so he had to quickly but thoroughly prepare. It seemed that the Skinner was very nervous before this meeting. He wanted not only to take a shower and change his tie, but also to thoroughly brush his teeth in order to feel the real taste of his new victim. Despite his haste, the scoundrel suddenly stopped as if he remembered something important. It turned out that he had completely forgotten about his previous victim, who was still sitting motionless at the table. The Skinner turned to the girl and, asking her for forgiveness, said that their relationship was over. At the same time, the scoundrel, using his abilities, released several threads from her hands. These threads quickly caught up with the girl and wrapped themselves around her body. For her, this was the end. The next moment, the villain literally tore his victim to pieces, explaining that he simply could not allow her to upset his guest. Meanwhile, the artificial intelligence confirmed Shen Ye's identification and asked him to utter a phrase that would be his unique summoning. After thinking for a bit, the guy said that in just 10 steps a person could lose his life. This phrase was accepted, so the glowing ball standing in the middle of the room began to disintegrate. Soon turned out that there was a very powerful motorcycle hidden in this ball. Shen Ye was very surprised and thought that it looked like the Ghost Rider's motorcycle, Qianzhu Shan. He said that this motorcycle had liquid cooling, a 4-cylinder engine, a light alloy body, a transformable horizontal suspension, and the company's proprietary Angel Wings flight system. The main character couldn't believe that this motorcycle could also fly. The man advised the guy to use automatic mode for the flight for now. Without wasting any time, Shen Ye sat on the motorcycle to experience all the comforts. He only regretted that it was not red, because then the motorcycle would have looked even cooler, like a bright flame. At that moment, the vehicle changed its color thanks to its modern body made of precious metal. This couldn't help but amaze Shen Ye. Qianzhu Shan suggested that the situation in which the main character found himself was very dangerous, since the Kunlun system provided him with a brand new motorcycle model for escape. The man insisted that this vehicle could have once saved the boy's life. Suddenly, Shen Ye asked if this system could know who exactly wanted to kill him. The head of the company replied that even if this was known, the system would still not interfere with such trifles until the main character demonstrated his value for the survival of human civilization. Shen Ye heard this and regretfully realized that in this world, if a person had no value, then no one cared whether he was alive or dead. Next, Qianzhu Shan asked that the main character have a good rest this evening and not go anywhere, because tomorrow morning he had to go to an exam, which would be attended by masters from 3 prestigious universities. At this time, Chao Mengyu with Zhao Yibin arrived at the appointed place for the meeting. The place of this meeting was the very same country hotel where the Skinner lived. Zhao Yibin didn't yet know what fate was in store for her, so now she was only worried about how Mr. Han would react to the fact that she brought Chao with her. Menui. At the same time, Chao Menu looked around the hotel and its surroundings. The intense murderous energy that emanated from this place, although well hidden, was still felt. The girl then asked if that person had provided Zhao Yibin pills and elixirs to improve her results, and even helped her get into a prestigious school. The schoolgirl explained that this was the price for organizing a conspiracy of classmates against Shen Ye. Then Chao Menhui explained that since the main character signed an agreement with the International Martial Arts Association, the girl's mission was considered a failure, and now she had to think about what her destiny would be. She then considered that Zhao Yibing was just an ordinary young girl from a poor family who exchanged Shen Ye for a deal in order to improve her situation, but she had no idea what it would lead to. Chao Menyu decided to give the girl two options. Either she hides nearby and waits until everything is over and then acts as a witness, or she goes to her patron and pretends that she came here alone. It was clear that Zhao Yibin was unhappy that the girl seemed to be trying to interfere with her future, but she hesitated for a moment. In the end, the girl chose the second option and confidently headed to the hotel where they were already waiting for her. Chao Menyu accepted this choice calmly, as if she knew that the result would be exactly like this, and began to observe. As soon as Zhao Yibing walked to the exit door of Chao's mansion, Menyu grabbed her sword, expecting the worst to happen. After some time, the servant met the girl and led her through the dark corridors to the right room. The Skinner immediately forgot about everything as soon as he saw his guest. Without wasting any time, he handed Zhao Yibin flowers, said along the way that she was the most beautiful girl he had ever met, so he was ready to help her in everything. Zhao Yibing didn't expect Mr. Han to be such a kind person, so she sincerely thanked him for everything and asked what else she needed to do with Shen Ye. Zhao Yibin. She was afraid that the main character would take revenge on her. Then the man began to assure her that there was nothing to worry about because while he was next to the girl, no one would be able to harm her. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swung one of the windows open and let the evening coolness into the mansion. Zhao Yibin, feeling this intense cold, unconsciously pressed herself against the hand of the skin peeler, not even suspecting what kind of person this person really was. While the girl turned away, the man saw how sharp blades created with the help of a special ability were already flying around him. The gallant scoundrel handed over to Zhao Yibin took off his jacket while still thinking about the very powerful energy coming from the blade that was directed at him. The man realized that someone was hunting him, so he needed to speed up the process. He couldn't let this romantic encounter be ruined, so he tried to take Zhao away as quickly as possible. Yibin to another place. Walking slowly through the dark corridors of the estate, the Skinner informed his guest that he had already recommended her to 3 of the best universities. The girl was amazed by this because she knew that very famous and talented people studied there. In addition, admission to one of these universities guaranteed great opportunities and a successful career. Zhao Yibin. It seemed that Mr. Han was simply deceiving her, so the man told her that last year he had made a huge contribution to archaeology, thanks to which the Kunlun system provided him with privileges. The villain was ready to transfer one of these privileges to the girl. He also promised that he would help her become stronger, but before that she needed to enter her personal information into the phone. At that very moment, Zhao Yibin received a notice stating that she had gained the right to participate in the entrance exam for the top 3 universities. The joyful girl immediately threw herself into the arms of Mr. Khan and along the way sincerely thanked him. The Skinner suddenly asked if his guest was happy now. Without thinking twice, the schoolgirl, with tears of joy in her eyes, confidently confirmed that she was now happy. The man was very pleased with what he heard, because it meant that the long-awaited moment of harvesting had finally arrived. Without hurrying, the scoundrel grabbed Zhao's head with both hands. Ibn began to slowly pull her towards himself. The girl at that moment continued to smile sincerely, not yet understanding what was happening to her. Suddenly, the Skinner used his powers to literally tear off the head of his next victim and passionately kissed her on the lips. Then the villain began to dance with his victim and enjoying this moment, saying that he was also very happy for her. The man pulls the strings and controls Zhao Yibin like a doll, could not wait for the moment when they would create a magnificent masterpiece together. His feet from pleasure, and his whole body was shaking with excitement. He admired his victim and said that just looking at her, he was ready to cry with happiness. At that moment, a bright blue light suddenly flashed in the corridor of the estate, which flashed through the darkness at great speed. The Skinner didn't pay any attention to this because he was completely absorbed in his thoughts about what he would do to Zhao Yibin next. The next moment, a loud impact sound was heard in the huge country hotel, causing the earth around it to shake. The huge wall of the estate was partially destroyed, so Chao Mengyu was able to enter without any obstacles. The first thing she did, of course, was check Zhao's current condition, Ibn. Unfortunately, the girl was late. She believed that if she had the will of the blade, the villain would behave more restrained, But she did not expect at all that he would turn out to be a real madman. Soon, from the thick clouds of dust that arose after the explosion, the loud voice of the Skinner could be heard, demanding that Chow Menu did not approach his victim. The man, filled with rage, without a moment's hesitation, rushed at the girl, continuing to insist that Zhao Yibin belonged only to him. To Chow's surprise, Menu remained absolutely calm, even when a madman approached her with the intention of killing her. The girl seemed to know how she could influence this maniac. With just a small swing of her sword, she quickly pointed her weapon at Zhao. Yibin, of course, saw Skinner. This seriously alarmed him. The man immediately stopped and demanded that the girl not dare to hurt his victim. For this, he promised to do everything she asked. Chow Menu asked who the villain's boss was. Despite his promise, the man was in no hurry to answer. Thanks to the girl's masterful use of the blade technique, he realized that the legendary Chow stood before him, Menui. Then the Flayer asked the girl to look around carefully because his threads had already surrounded her. He also insisted that it would not be possible to simply break through them. That is why the man confidently asked Chow Mengyu return Zhao to him. Yibin only in this case was he willing to release her. As soon as the scoundrel said this, he immediately realized that it would not be so easy for him to come to an agreement with this person. The girl, of course, did not agree with these conditions. Instead of negotiations, she decided to get down to business, and for this, she prepared to use one of her blade techniques. Fearlessly looking his enemy straight in the eye, Chow Mengyu calmly suggested that they see which of the two could withstand the blow. The Skinner was very upset when he realized that his plans were not destined to come true. This brought tears to his eyes. The man suffered greatly from the fact that he had just met Zhao Ibn, but they had to part already. The scoundrel also regretted that he had not had time to taste the flesh of his victim. Due to severe stress, the scoundrel suddenly had two conflicting feelings. One of them was that Zhao Yibin was the ideal victim, while the other insisted that it was Chow who had to be eaten, Menui. Eventually, the Skinner fell into a real madness, which was accompanied by uncontrollable anger. Now he was determined to devour two girls at once. Chow Mengyu took what she saw with complete calm, but immediately decided that now even the threat of death would not be able to influence the scoundrel. Having realized this, the girl decided to resort to a different approach and unexpectedly offered the maniac to make a deal. Chow Mengyu explained that if the scoundrel tells who was behind him, then she will not only return to him, Zhao Ibn will also allow them to try to kill her. The Flayer responded that even if this deal does not happen, he will still be able to get Chow's body. Mengyu simply killed her. The girl did not deny the fact that the man would be able to overcome her, but there was no guarantee that he would get her entire body. She also guaranteed that no matter whether the man succeeded or not, she would not rely on the strength of the Luo family and would not allow any of them to take revenge on him. Hearing this, Skinner became noticeably calmer, but he still did not fully believe that Chow Mengyu told him the truth. In order to convince the maniac, the girl could not give him anything other than her word of honor. This situation amused the man, because the betrayal of the puppeteer was tantamount to breaking the rules of the League of Assassins. In the future, he too could face persecution from the League. Chow Mengyu remaining just as serious, she asked if the scoundrel was really scared. The Skinner immediately began to deny this and say that in order to get the girl, he was ready to make any sacrifice. Chow Mengyu warned that in any case she would not give up so easily. This did not frighten the scoundrel at all, because on this wonderful night he had a chance to get two beautiful works of art at once. The man then took Zhao Ibn, took him into his arms and said that before he said the name of the puppeteer, he would like to send the girl to a safe place because it was unknown what would happen after that. At this time, Shen Ye stood on the roof of a skyscraper and looked into the distance, wondering if everything was okay with Chow Mengyu. After all, he couldn't get through to her. The main character was sure that the Skinner was not a serious rival for the girl, but he was worried that she could get into some kind of danger. In the end, the guy even turned to the skeleton and asked if he thought Chow had Menyu's chances of defeating the villain. Mikteti Kahiva answered honestly that the girl couldn't cope. The main character was very surprised by this answer, because he saw with his own eyes what Chow was capable of. Menu Skeleton explained that she simply wouldn't be able to dodge the attacks of the skin reminder. No matter how hard it was, Shen Ye eventually agreed that his friend was indeed in danger now. Despite this, Mikteti Kahiwa asked the boy to stop thinking about it and go to bed. The protagonist continued to think that at first he wanted to rely on Chow Mengyu to find out the truth, but ended up only putting her in danger. He was afraid that the girl would repeat the fate of her brother in Chen, Hao Yuya. Shen Ye believed that Chow Mengyu was the only one who tried her best for this matter, so he simply couldn't let her die. Suddenly the phone rang, which quickly distracted the guy from his sad thoughts. An unfamiliar number was calling him. The main character was sure that it was definitely not Chow who called. Menu, however, still answered the call. The voice on the other side immediately asked if she had reached Shen Ye. Having heard a positive answer, the girl said that according to her mother, she should find Shen Ye and contact the police if she could not contact her. The child also explained that her mother was the nurse who saw the protagonist encounter the ghost that day. Shen Ye immediately asked where that woman was now. The girl replied that they were supposed to meet at the mausoleum in the western part of the city, but she couldn't get through to her mother. Hearing this, the guy decided to go there. Mikteti Kahiva was categorically against this. However, the guy probably meant that the witness might have already been dead, and he didn't want the girl to feel lonely. Before setting off on his journey, the guy took a motorcycle with him and armed himself. The skeleton continued to insist that it was very dangerous there, so the main character could simply die. Despite this, Shen Ye believed that he could only obtain information through force. In other words, if he wanted to get to the truth, he had to rely only on himself. Mikteti Kahiwa still thought that all this was useless. Besides, they were on the 105th floor, and all the exits and elevators were closed. However, Shen Ye had a way to quickly leave the skyscraper. Suddenly, the main character pushed off the ground with force and made a small jump forward to the edge of the roof. Mikteti Kahiva assumed that the guy was going to fly away on a motorcycle, but this could create a lot of noise. Without explaining anything, the main character redistributed all his characteristics to agility. The skeleton hoped that the guy was not going to jump down, because even if his agility reached 30 points, a jump from such a height would still be fatal. Shen Ye calmly replied that he had to do it. Then he thoughtfully looked at the scientific sky full of clouds and lightning, which was the best cover for him now. The next moment, the main character took a step forward and quickly flew down, which greatly frightened Mikteti Kahiwa. Completely relaxed and with his eyes closed, the main character only felt the howl of the cold wind. Even though Shen Ye was rapidly approaching the ground, at this moment he was only thinking about the fact that it would rain tonight. While the main character fearlessly flew down from the high Mikteti skyscraper, Kahiva kept screaming in fear. The skeleton threatened that if the guy died, he would resort to the powers of necromancers to resurrect him and make the main character a brainless corpse. Shen Ye did not react to these threats. Before he even reached the ground, he suddenly summoned the gate to the nightmare world, which greatly surprised Mikteti Kahiwa. The main character ran into the world of nightmares, but due to the high speed, he continued to fall down, so the guy again called the gate, but this time they led to the ordinary human world. Shen Ye jumped out of the nightmare world and continued to fly down. It was still unclear what the guy was planning. It turned out that the main character calculated that while he opened the gate at a safe height during the fall, he could use the nightmare world as an aerial platform to unload his power. After that, the guy jumped out of the world of nightmares and continued his flight from the skyscraper, gradually approaching the ground. By repeating this trick over and over again, the protagonist essentially created an infinite fulcrum in the air. In the end, Shen Ye once again jumped out of the nightmare world and landed smoothly on the ground, completely unharmed. Despite Mikteti's success, Kahiwa scolded the guy for this prank, but Shen Ye believed that the skeleton was still shocked by his power. After this, the main character took out that same red motorcycle from his storage in order to use it to quickly get to the right place. Before setting off, he had to pronounce a code phrase. The motorcycle's artificial intelligence, having heard the necessary words, confirmed the password, after which the engine started. Ignoring the road markings, Shen Ye sped off into the distance at full speed along the quiet streets of the night metropolis. After some time, the guy stopped near an inconspicuous cafe on the western outskirts of the city. It was here that the girl who had recently called him should now be. Upon entering the cafe, the main character immediately saw the child and assumed that it was she who had called him. The girl confirmed this and then asked if the guy had seen her mother since she still couldn't get through to her. Shen Ye replied that he was going to go look for her. He also asked if the girl had called the police. It turned out that no one answered the call. The guy decided to call himself and was very surprised when no one at the police answered his call. Meanwhile, the girl continued to ask if her mother was alive and if Shen Ye would help find her. The girl had no father, so the main character decided to first take her to a safe place and then go in search of her mother. The guy turned to the motorcycle's artificial intelligence and asked it to take the child to the company and then return to him. The system quickly built a route and determined that the entire journey would take 5 minutes 40 seconds. The girl was very scared, so Shenya encouraged her and assured her that the place where she was about to arrive was very safe. Then the main character promised that he would find the child's mother and then take her to her. But for now, the girl had to wait a little. The frightened child, who was no longer able to hold back his tears, finally trusted the protagonist and agreed to follow his instructions. Immediately after this, the motorcycle engine started, and fire immediately burst out of the exhaust pipes. As soon as the child left Mikteti, Kahiwa asked if the guy was really going to look for the woman. He thought it was a waste of time. Besides, this child could become a burden for the guy. Shenya replied that the girl's mother had nothing to do with it, but still suffered greatly because of him. He felt guilty about it. The skeleton clearly didn't like the fact that the guy was too kind. After that, Mikteti Kahiwa asked if the main character felt anything strange in this area. The guy was surprised by this question at first, but soon he really felt uncomfortable. Shenya could sense the life energy, but since he entered this area other than that girl, he had not seen a single living soul. Mikteti Kahiva confirmed that there really wasn't a single living person in this area. Shenya immediately looked around to make sure of this. Suddenly, the silence of the night was broken by loud sounds that seemed to be coming from very close by. This immediately attracted the attention of the main character. The skeleton was certain that it was the noise of battle that was coming from the Fenglin Hotel. Shenya realized that there was a fierce battle going on there right now, so there was no longer any room for waiting. Mikteti along the way, Kakivu should cover him and warn him if something happens so that he can escape. Mikteti Kahiwa was sure that the noise of the battle was coming from the Fenglin Hotel. Shenya realized that there was a fierce battle going on there now, so there was no longer any time to wait. Mikteti along the way, Kakivu should cover him and warn him if something happens so that he can escape. Soon the main character was already inside the gloomy mansion and was moving forward, looking around carefully along the way. Suddenly, a hotel employee appeared in front of the guy and asked if he had booked Mikteti's room. Kahiwa reassured the guard by saying that the girl was already dead. Without wasting any time, Shenya grabbed his weapon, fearing a sudden attack. At the same time, he used Shadow Whisper and asked the girl how she died and what she was doing here anyway. The girl obediently replied that they were all killed by their master. According to her, the villain used a special silk thread to tie the bodies of the victims and also magic to control their souls. Then the guy asked why the girl didn't attack him. It turned out that she was set up as a puppet to provide services to the guests. She would fight only after receiving an order from the owner. The main character also asked how many more people had died here. The worker replied that absolutely everyone had died. This discouraged the guy. The girl, through bloody tears, continued to say that all the people in this area were already dead. Shenya was shocked by what he heard, as he never expected the scale of the disaster to be so huge. A sudden loud blow quickly brought the boy to his senses. Mikteti Kahiva. I realized that the battle was now taking place on the roof. This was a chance to get into room 707, where, according to the girl, her mother was. No longer paying attention to the dead hotel worker, Shenya suddenly jumped up and ran forward to try to find the woman. After some time of wandering through dark corridors, the guy finally managed to find the right room. Without ceremony, the main character knocked down the door of the hotel room with one loud blow. Before even entering the room, Shenya was suddenly stunned and felt a wild horror from what he saw. The entire room was literally littered with human bodies. All of these people had died in terrible agony, and many of the bodies were mutilated. In addition, red silk thread was visible everywhere. Having overcome his horror, Shenya began to walk through the group of rooms, using the skill Whisper of Darkness, and asking the dead if any of them knew him. The dead answered that no one knew the guy, K. There, they already said that no one survived here. Suddenly, a weak female voice was heard from the darkness, which stated that it knew the main character. In confirmation of this, it named his name. The dead woman said that when she was on duty, she saw a guy talking to ghosts. Shenya realized on Tuesday that this woman was the same nurse and the girl's mother. The guy was not at all happy that he found her here in such a state. First of all, the main character asked for forgiveness because the woman died because of him. To this, the dead man replied that all this was no longer important. The woman also asked Shenya to avenge them all if he could. The guy assured that he would definitely do it. In addition, he promised to do everything possible to ensure that the woman's daughter grew up safe. The woman seemed very surprised when she heard about her daughter, as if she didn't remember her at all. Then the main character said that the girl had recently called him and told him everything. Shenya didn't have time to say everything he wanted, because suddenly a huge blast wave destroyed the entire room. It turned out that at that time an explosion occurred on the roof of the hotel, which was probably provoked by a fierce battle. Shen fortunately was not injured, but he was very surprised and did not understand what was happening. Mktedi Kahiva explained that the explosion had occurred from above, and now the building was collapsing. Then the boy heard a loud male voice loudly asking who dared to ruin his plans. At that moment, the skeleton felt that one of the fighters above had very weak energy. Through the thick clouds of dust, the silhouette of a man suddenly began to appear, quickly approaching the main character. Shen immediately understood who the falling man was, so he jumped high into the air and put his hands forward, preparing to catch him. As expected, that person was Chow Menu. The guy managed to catch her in time, and now the girl was out of danger. Having come to her senses and seeing the main character, the great swordswoman was very surprised and asked what he was doing here. Shenya replied that he came to save the girl. She was very skeptical that the guy had insignificant strength, but he still came here. Then the girl sighed heavily and thought about how she had to suppress her strength so that the enemy would fall for her trick. But the appearance of the main character ruined everything. However, even in this case, Chow Meng-yu still had an ace up her sleeve that she was determined to use for Shenye's sake now. Suddenly, the girl felt a strong blow to her neck from the main character. Shenye asked the girl for forgiveness while thinking that since she was a great swordswoman, he needed to give it his all to knock her out. Chow Meng-yu, of course, was not happy about this and was going to explain to the guy that he was wrong, but consciousness quickly left her. After this, the main character again asked for forgiveness and explained that he simply did not want the girl to find out his secret. Of course, it was about the gate to the world of nightmares, which Shun Ye immediately used to go with Chow Meng-yu left the battlefield in his arms. Meanwhile, the Skinner is leisurely strolling through the ruins of the hotel, not understanding where his opponent has disappeared to. The scoundrel assumed that the girl wanted to play hide-and-seek with him and thought it was funny. The entire hotel was littered with the man's eyes and ears, so now he was intent on having some fun. The maniac went in search of his victim, starting the countdown along the way. Escaping from the pursuit of the Skinner, the protagonist summoned the gate, and together with Chow, Menu was transported into a world of nightmares. Once safe, the boy first turned to Mktedi Kahiwa, asked him to find suitable armor for him and the girl. Soon after, Shenya went to another world to find the help he now needed. It turned out that the skeleton was dressed up by Chow Menu in the battle suit of the Holy Rabbit, which the main character did not like at all. The guy didn't understand how Mktedi Kahiwa actually managed to find such equipment on the battlefield. The skeleton replied that this should have been asked not from him, but from the people who took similar equipment into battle. After some time, Shenye came across some people, and without thinking asked them to help the dying girl. The men, seeing the main character, immediately recognized him as a guy who had survived a misfortune and therefore happily accepted him. However, Shenye did not like the use of this nickname at all. Next, the healers laid Chow down. Menu put her on the table, and after examining her, they realized that she was seriously injured, so they now needed the expensive holy runes. Without thinking, Shenye took out the money that the king had given him last time and again asked the men to help the victim faster. Everyone was surprised because they realized that this was the money that the king gave the guy as payment for his education. The main character did not understand how the healers found out about this. One of them explained that the bag had a special seal with the coat of arms of the royal family, which was proof that the money belonged to the king. This bag alone was worth a lot of money. Shenye was tired of explaining, so he demanded that the men stop talking nonsense and quickly start saving Chow Menu before she gets worse. The healers immediately declared that they would do everything possible to save the girl, after which they set to work with great enthusiasm. For some time, the men diligently recited spells and used various abilities to cure Chow Meng-yu. All this was accompanied by a mesmerizing visual effect that impressed Shun Ye. The main character was also surprised that absolutely all the healers started working. Thanks to this, the guy believed that they could be relied on. Suddenly, the system informed the guard that his nickname had begun to disappear, because now he had become famous for returning to the battlefield and saving a comrade while sacrificing everything he had. The royal gold coin that the protagonist paid with was 100 times more valuable than the usual one. In other words, the guy, in order to save Chow Meng-yu, invested an amount that was 1,000 times the usual medical expenses. That was why, from now on, people would discuss Shenye's noble and lofty morals and call him the Undying One. The system congratulated the guy on acquiring a new nickname. Despite the fact that the main character got rid of the nickname he hated and received a new one, now it did not make him happy at all because he finally realized what he had done and how much money he had thoughtlessly spent. Meanwhile, the healers, calling the main character not dying, happily reported that the treatment had already been completed. Shenya asked how things were going. It turned out that the man used the best medical technology, thanks to which the girl's body quickly recovered and she could wake up in a few minutes. Mkteti Kahiva confirmed that Chow's life force menu was now unusually strong. Hearing this, Shenya again took the girl in his arms and thanked the healers and quickly began to leave before she woke up. The guy thought that it was necessary to wake up the girl already in the main world. Meanwhile, everyone around was discussing our heroes, believing that they were lovers. After some time, after a long sleep, Menu finally began to open her eyes. The girl, of course, did not immediately remember what had happened to her and where she was now. However, as soon as Chow Menu saw the main character and instantly remembered everything, Shun Ye was glad that the girl woke up. The next moment, as if from nowhere, a bright beam of light appeared, which flashed through the darkness like lightning. Snatching her sword and quickly pointing it at Shun Ye, the girl asked with displeasure what he had done to her. Shun Ye immediately understood what Chow was asking him. Menu therefore calmly explained that the healing technique he used was only effective in a stunned state. At that moment, the girl noticed that all her wounds had completely healed, so now she felt awkward about pointing the weapon at her savior. In the end, the girl admitted that she was wrong about the guy. Shen Ye apologized for hitting her so suddenly and then said that the enemy would be here soon, so they needed to be on guard. Suddenly something caught the attention of the main character, and he simply could not contain his surprise. It turned out that now on Chow Menu was given the effect of Sufferer, which would last for another 3 hours. The girl did not know about it, but she felt very lively. She believed that this was the result of the healing technique. The protagonist had never heard of such an effect before, but he assumed that perhaps the healing he had just received had given the girl a special bonus to her characteristics. Before the upcoming battle, the main character reminded the girl that she needed to find out who the puppeteer was. To Chow's surprise, Menu already knew about this. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to tell everything because suddenly the voice of the Skinner was heard, who happily declared that he had finally found his opponent. The man, shrouded in an ominous aura, was surprised that the protagonist was also here, but he thought that he had appeared just in time. I saw that the maniac was approaching Chow Menui. She said that since the guy didn't have any strong skills, he should leave. Despite this, she hoped that the main character still had some hidden power. Shen Ye, without thinking twice, said that the girl was right, and it really was better for him not to engage in battle. After that, he wished her luck and quickly left. Chow. This was not what Menu expected at all. Still, she thought that the guy only had the talent of healing and therefore she would have to cope alone. The Skinner came closer and closer and, smiling coyly, said that the girl would not be able to escape with the main character because he had already come specifically for her. Chow. Without saying anything, Menu suddenly drew her weapon from its sheath and delivered a lightning-fast blow. This attack caught up with the villain. He didn't even try to dodge it. It seemed he just didn't have time to do it. Since the girl had already surpassed all the peaks, the destructive streams of energy that were released from her sword continued their rapid flight forward despite all the obstacles. Eventually, this energy burst out and struck the sky like lightning, causing significant damage to the building along the way. Rock debris and thick dust began to quickly fall down right where the Skinner stood, but unfortunately this was far from the end of the battle. The villain was only slightly injured but was greatly discouraged. He could not believe that Chow Meng-yu still possessed such incredible strength, despite having received a serious injury from him just recently. Hearing this, Chow Minhui realized that her opponent was about to figure out what had happened to her when she briefly disappeared from sight. As expected, the Skinner realized that it was Shen Ye who helped the girl disappear. Now it was clear to him that the main character was far from an ordinary boy. Eventually, the man resigned himself to it and focused on Chow again. Menui's fortitude and willpower made him burn. The villain, distraught with emotion, raised his head and with a smile on his face loudly asked the girl for permission to continue their intertwining. Meanwhile, in another world, the healers were still discussing the main character and believed that the king treated him very well since he gave him so many gold coins. The men were delighted that Shen Ye had given them all his money to save the girl. They even began to point out that they had done wrong when they had accepted all that money. One of the healers asked his comrades not to worry about this because he hid some coins in Chow's clothes. Menu also cast a blessing of strength effect on her for 3 hours. Everyone was shocked when they heard about the effect being applied because they didn't expect that any of them would do it. During the further conversation, it turned out that each of the healers gave the victim one effect. Among them were the blessing of agility, the resonant blessing, the blessing of perception, the spiritual blessing, and others. In the end, it turned out that Chow Menu combined all the blessings into herself. When something like this happened, all the blessings became the highest enhancement magic. This buff was called Holy Summoner and allowed the player to double the effects of all blessings and extend their duration by 3 hours. The problem was that this magic could only be used by members of the royal family. Its illegal use was a serious crime. Everyone immediately became nervous. Suddenly, one of the healers said that they rarely managed to get together during the war, so it was necessary to release a full set of blessings. He also believed that they became friends with the main character, so he would not tell anyone anything. At this time, Chow Menu deftly defended herself from all the attacks that the Skin Reaver dealt her. Dodging another attack, the girl noticed that the speed and strength of the silk threads had become stronger. Compared to how it all began, the villain's attacks had become twice as fierce. She didn't understand how the man could increase his strength, but suddenly she remembered that from the very beginning of the fight, there was a continuous sound of chow around her. Menu felt that she had to carefully examine what that sound was. Just at that moment, the girl heard another strange sound behind the wall, which immediately attracted her attention. Continuing to dodge the attacks of the maniac, Chow Menu approached the door that led to the next room. The sound was coming from there. Suddenly, this door began to creak open, due to which the girl saw that strange singing was sounding from many severed human heads. Chow Menu didn't expect to see anything like this at all, but she tried to maintain her composure and not give in to panic. The Skinner appeared in front of the girl, who quickly closed that very door. He was a little upset that his guest had already found the gift prepared for her. Nevertheless, the villain, with tears in his eyes, asked the girl to listen to the singing of the dead, because they did it especially for them. Standing on one knee and holding a wedding ring in his hands, the man claimed that it was his and Chow's Menui wedding song. It turned out that the Skinner used blood magic to use the Curse of 10,000 Creatures technique.